The ancient silver pines whispered secrets only those with wolf blood could understand. Magnus stood atop a weathered granite outcropping, his powerful frame silhouetted against the twilight sky. The wind carried scents from miles around, telling stories more precise than any human scout could report. His nostrils flared, catching the unmistakable metallic tang that made his muscles tense. Silver. He closed his eyes, listening to the forest beneath him. 7 generations of silver pine alphas had stood upon this very rock, watching over the territories that had been entrusted to their protection since time beyond memory. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind. An alpha does not rule the pack, Magnus. The pack is not yours to command, but yours to serve. At 45, Magnus had served as Alpha King for nearly 2 decades. The silver streaks at his temples had been earned through years of vigilance, of hard choices made for the greater good of his people. The scars that mapped his body told stories of battles fought and won, of lessons paid for in blood. Now, those hard-earned instincts were screaming danger. "They're moving deeper than before," said Cain, his second-in-command, emerging silently from the shadows of the pines. The younger wolf's face was grim, the tribal markings on his arms seeming to shift in the dappled moonlight. 3 miles past the old boundary stones. Magnus nodded, his gray eyes scanning the distant tree line where human lands began. "And the weapons?" "Silver-tipped arrows, silver-edged blades. Even their torches carry something unnatural. The flames burn blue when they touch our territory markers." Cain's voice dropped lower. "This is not a simple hunting party, my king. This is systematic." The Alpha King absorbed this information without visible reaction. Though rage simmered beneath his stoic exterior, the Treaty of the Silver Moon had stood for 60 years, established after the last Great War, when both sides had suffered devastating losses. Now Governor Dominic Ovidian was testing those boundaries, inch by calculated inch. "Gather the Border Patrol. We track them, but do not engage. I want to know what they're doing in our territory," Magnus ordered, his voice carrying the quiet authority that needed no volume to command respect. As Cain melted back into the forest, Magnus knelt and pressed his palm against the cold stone beneath him. Through this connection, he could feel the pulse of silver pine itself, the ancient magic that bound wolf and land together. The heartbeat felt irregular tonight, disturbed. Something was wrong, not just border incursions, but a deeper threat. He closed his eyes, remembering the night his father had brought him to this rock as a boy. "Our ancestors chose this land not for its bounty, but for its burden," his father had explained. "The silver pines are both blessing and curse to our kind. Their magic strengthens us, but the silver in their roots reminds us of our vulnerability. This is why we must be worthy guardians." Magnus stood, decision made. He would lead the patrol himself. Whatever Dominic was planning, the Alpha King would meet it head-on. The transformation came naturally, decades of practice making it almost painless. His body flowed from human to wolf form, bones reshaping, muscles expanding, senses sharpening beyond human comprehension. Where a man had stood, now crouched a massive silver-gray wolf, powerful enough to strike fear into the hearts of those who had never witnessed such majesty before. With a silent command to his pack members nearby, Magnus descended the rock and vanished into the primal darkness of his ancestral forest. Across the border in the village of Ashevale, Serena crushed dried silver leaf between her fingertips, inhaling its sharp, clean scent before adding it to the steeping tea. The small cottage smelled of herbs and healing, a sanctuary she had created from necessity after her parents' deaths 3 years ago. At 27, she had become both mother and provider to her younger sister Lily, using the healing skills passed down through generations of women in her family, skills that had to remain hidden. "Will Mrs. Caldwell's fever break tonight?" Lily asked, her 15-year-old face serious beyond her years as she carefully labeled jars of salve. Serena smiled tiredly. "It should. The infection's responding to the golden seal. I'll check on her again before dawn." She didn't mention that she'd done more than provide herbal remedies. When certain that no one was watching, she had placed her hands over the elderly woman's chest, allowing the warm golden energy to flow from her palms, accelerating the healing process. The village called her a gifted healer with extraordinary knowledge of plants. Only Lily knew the truth. Their grandmother had possessed the same gift. The village had burned her for it. "Serena?" Lily's voice pulled her from dark memories. "The soldiers were in the marketplace again today. They're searching for something, or someone." Serena's hands stilled. The Vidian soldiers had been an increasingly common presence in Ashevale over the past months. The border village had always existed in an uneasy balance, technically under Vidian rule, but close enough to Silverpine territory that many traditional protections against wolf sympathizers were loosely enforced. That had been changing since Governor Dominic had taken power. "Did they speak to you?" Serena asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "No, but they were asking questions about healers." Lily's eyes, so like their mother's, held worry beyond her years. "About unusual healings." A chill ran through Serena that had nothing to do with the autumn evening. She forced a reassuring smile. "Then we'll be more careful. Stick to the traditional remedies for a while." Later, as Lily slept, Serena sat by their small hearth, fingers tracing the worn leather cover of her grandmother's journal. Inside were not just herbal recipes, but secrets of a power that flowed through their bloodline, a connection to life forces that humans had forgotten how to touch. Her grandmother had called them omegas, though she never explained the term's full meaning. "In the ancient times," she had whispered to Serena as a child, "omegas walked between worlds, healing what was broken, bringing balance where chaos reigned." A memory surfaced, one that Serena revisited often during troubled times. She had been 8 years old, her mother desperately ill with a wasting fever. Their grandmother had been gone for nearly a year, her ashes scattered by fearful villagers. In desperation, Serena had ventured alone into the forbidden Silverpine forest, seeking the rare silver leaf that grew only in wolf territory. Lost and terrified, certain that monsters would devour her at any moment, she had instead encountered a magnificent silver wolf with intelligent gray eyes. Rather than attacking, it had led her to a hidden grove where silver leaf grew in abundance. More incredibly, it had then escorted her safely to the forest's edge, vanishing only when human lands were in sight. Her mother had survived, thanks to that wolf's mercy. A sharp knock at the door jolted Serena from her memories. Visitors at this hour were rare and rarely brought good news. Quickly hiding the journal beneath a loose floorboard, she approached the door cautiously. "Who comes at this hour?" she called. "Thomas, from the West Pastures," came a strained voice. "Please, healer, my boy's been hurt." Serena opened the door to find the shepherd supporting his teenage son, whose leg was badly gashed. "Bring him to the table," she instructed, professional calm taking over. As she cleaned the wound, Tomas explained in a hushed voice. "We were checking the flock. Soldiers stopped us, said we were too close to the border. When Jacob argued that it was our land, always had been." He gestured helplessly at his son's injury. Examining the deep cut, Serena recognized the distinctive pattern. This wasn't made by an ordinary blade. "Silver," Jacob whispered through clenched teeth, "said it was their new standard issue, protection against wolfkind and their sympathizers." Serena kept her expression neutral as she applied a poultice, but inside her mind was racing. Silver weapons were rare and expensive, traditionally reserved for ceremonial purposes or specialized hunters. Mass-producing them for common soldiers suggested preparations for conflict far beyond border enforcement. After the shepherds left, Serena found herself unable to sleep. Dawn was still hours away when she made her decision. Leaving a note for Lily, she gathered specific herbs into her medicine pouch and slipped out into the darkness. The old forest path was barely visible, but her feet remembered the way. The border between human lands and Silverpine was marked by ancient stones, worn smooth by centuries of weather. Crossing them felt like passing through an invisible curtain, the air itself changing quality, becoming charged with something primal and alive. She shouldn't be here. Humans found in wolf territory were rarely seen again, especially now with tensions rising. But something pulled her forward, the same instinct that had guided her healing hands since childhood. The forest had changed in the 19 years since her childhood adventure. Areas that had been dense with undergrowth were now cleared in unnatural lines, as if methodically searched or harvested. The silver pines themselves seemed fewer, their distinctive blue-silver needles dulled. Serena froze at a sound ahead. Voices, human voices, speaking in the clipped tones of Vidian military dialect. Crouching behind a fallen log, she peered through a gap in the bark. In a small clearing ahead, a group of soldiers in Vidian uniforms had established what appeared to be a temporary laboratory. Glass vials reflected moonlight, and a small forge burned with unnatural blue flames. A man in officer's garb, supervised as soldiers, carefully extracted sap from a wounded silver pine, the tree's trunk scarred by dozens of similar extractions. "Governor Dominic requires another batch by tomorrow," the officer was saying. "The compound becomes unstable if not processed within hours of collection." "Sir, these trees are becoming harder to find," one soldier replied. "The inner territories are too heavily patrolled by the wolf packs." The officer's response chilled Serena's blood. "Then we create a distraction. The hunting party to the north should draw their alpha's attention while we work." A hunting party targeting the Alpha King? This was no border dispute, but a calculated attack. Serena needed to warn someone, though she had no idea how to contact the wolf packs or if they would listen to a human before killing her. She began to retreat slowly when her foot dislodged a stone. The tiny sound seemed deafening in the night stillness. "Check the perimeter!" the officer commanded, and soldiers moved toward her position with alarming speed. Serena ran, abandoning stealth for speed, branches whipping her face as she plunged deeper into unknown forest rather than risk being caught on the path back to human lands. Her heart pounded in her ears, nearly drowning out the sounds of pursuit behind her. A root caught her foot, sending her sprawling into a ravine. Pain shot through her ankle as she tumbled down the steep incline, finally coming to rest in a hollow beneath tangled roots. Pressing herself into the shadows, she held her breath as boots crunched on leaves overhead. "Nothing here," a voice eventually called. "Probably just a forest creature." "Keep searching," came the response. "Governor's orders are clear. No witnesses." Minutes stretched like hours as Serena remained hidden, fear and confusion warring in her mind. What was this compound they were extracting? Why were silver weapons suddenly being distributed to common soldiers? And why target the Alpha King specifically? When silence finally returned, she cautiously emerged from hiding, only to realize she was now hopelessly lost in the depths of Silverpine. Her ankle throbbed, likely sprained in her fall. Looking up through the canopy, she tried to orient herself by the stars, but the dense forest blocked most of the night sky. A twig snapped somewhere to her left. Serena froze, instinctively knowing this was no human pursuer. The presence approaching carried something ancient and predatory, something that made the very air vibrate with tension. Slowly she turned. 30 paces away stood an enormous wolf, its silver-gray fur luminescent in a shaft of moonlight that seemed to find it specifically among the shadows, its eyes, intelligent and assessing, fixed on her with unmistakable recognition. The same eyes she remembered from 19 years ago. Magnus had tracked the human patrol for nearly 2 hours, watching as they systematically harvested sap from the sacred silver pines. This was no random trespass, but a calculated operation. His scouts had reported similar activities in 3 other locations around Silverpine's borders, all carefully timed to avoid regular pack patrols. What troubled him most was the blue flame they used to process the sap immediately after collection. The unnatural color indicated alchemical manipulation, transforming the sap's natural properties into something else entirely, something weaponized. He was preparing to withdraw and gather his forces when he caught an unexpected scent on the shifting breeze. Human, female, frightened, and something else beneath those surface notes, something that triggered a memory decades old. Signaling Kane to continue observing the soldiers, Magnus moved silently through the underbrush, tracking this new presence. When he found her, fallen and injured but attempting to hide her tracks, something ancient stirred in his wolf's consciousness. Her scent carried markers his instincts recognized, though his human mind struggled to categorize. Omega. The thought surfaced unbidden from deep ancestral memory. It had been generations since a true Omega had been identified, their bloodlines thought lost or diluted beyond recognition among humans. Yet here was a scent his wolf self instantly recognized, though it should be impossible. More immediately familiar was her face. 19 years had transformed a frightened child into a woman, but those eyes remained unchanged, holding the same determination even in terror that had impressed him when she'd ventured into these woods alone to save her mother. He approached cautiously, maintaining eye contact, trying to convey that he meant no harm. The woman, Omega or not, was clearly injured, and the Vidian soldiers were still searching the forest. She was in danger on multiple fronts. The decision came instinctively. Magnus stepped into a shaft of moonlight, allowing her to see him clearly. then deliberately turned his head toward a game trail before looking back at her with intent. When she didn't move, he took several steps down the trail, then stopped and looked back again. "Follow me." The message was clear even without words. To his surprise, after a moment's hesitation, she limped forward, keeping a cautious distance but accepting his guidance. He led her carefully away from the areas where soldiers patrolled, taking a circuitous route toward a sheltered overhang he knew would provide temporary safety. The woman followed silently, wincing occasionally when her injured ankle took her weight, but never complaining. When they reached the natural shelter formed by an outcropping of rock, Magnus indicated she should rest. She sank down gratefully, examining her ankle with practiced movements that suggested medical knowledge. Magnus maintained his wolf form, settling at the entrance to the overhang where he could watch for threats while giving her space. He needed to return to his patrol, but abandoning an injured human, especially this particular human, to the mercy of Vidian soldiers, felt wrong on a level that transcended politics. "You're him, aren't you?" Her voice came softly from the shadows. "The wolf who showed me the silver leaf all those years ago." Magnus turned his head, meeting her gaze directly. "I never forgot," she continued, a small smile touching her lips, despite her obvious pain and fear. "My mother lived because of you. I never thought I'd have the chance to thank you." The simple gratitude in her voice triggered something protective in Magnus. Humans rarely acknowledge debts to wolfkind, preferring to demonize what they feared. This woman was different. A distant howl shattered the moment, the distinctive pitch communicating danger in a code only pack members understood. His patrol was under attack. The hunting party the officer had mentioned must have engaged with Kane's forces. Magnus rose instantly, torn between duty to his pack and the instinct to protect this injured Omega. The woman seemed to read his conflict. "Go," she said firmly. "I'll be fine now that I know which direction to head when it's safe." She pointed correctly toward the border. "Thank you again." With a final look that he hoped conveyed both warning to stay hidden and promise to return, Magnus slipped out of the shelter and raced toward the sounds of conflict, his powerful form a silver blur among the shadows. He found chaos. What had been described as a hunting party was in fact an organized military unit, heavily armed with silver weapons and showing none of the disorganized terror humans typically displayed when confronting wolfkind. These men had been trained specifically to combat his people. Kane was coordinating a defensive retreat, 3 pack members already wounded by silver-tipped arrows. Magnus joined the fight, his appearance rallying his wolves as he took down 2 soldiers with swift, calculated attacks meant to disable rather than kill. Unnecessary deaths would only strengthen Vidian propaganda against them. The tide began to turn as the wolves' superior coordination and knowledge of the territory gave them advantage despite the specialized weapons. Then Magnus caught a scent that made his blood run cold. Beneath the expected smells of human sweat, leather, and metal was a sharp chemical odor he'd never encountered before. Looking closer at a fallen soldier's weapons, he saw a faint bluish residue coating the silver arrowheads. One of his wounded pack members suddenly convulsed, the area around his silver-inflicted wound turning black, dark veins spreading outward at an alarming rate. Magnus had seen silver poisoning before, all wolves had, but never progressing with such unnatural speed. "Fall back," he commanded through their pack bond. "Do not engage directly." As his pack retreated deeper into friendly territory, Magnus remained to cover their withdrawal. That's when he felt it. A sharp sting between his shoulder blades, followed by burning pain unlike anything he'd experienced in decades of combat. An arrow, its silver tip enhanced with the blue compound, had found its mark. Magnus fought the immediate disorientation, forcing himself to run after his retreating pack. The burning spread rapidly through his system, bringing not just pain, but a fog that made coordinating his movements increasingly difficult. He made it nearly a mile before his legs gave out, the transformation back to human form happening involuntarily as his body fought the spreading poison. On hands and knees, Magnus struggled to control his breathing, to push back against the darkness encroaching on his vision. "The mighty Alpha King!" came a voice dripping with satisfaction. "Not so fearsome now." Magnus looked up to see a tall figure in the ornate uniform of a Vidian governor. Dominic himself had come to witness this trap being sprung. Behind him stood a dozen soldiers with weapons trained on Magnus. "Our new compound works even better than anticipated. Dominic continued, circling Magnus like a predator, though they both knew which of them was truly prey. Silver alone is merely painful to your kind. Silver enhanced with extracted essence of the very trees that give you strength? That is poetic justice. Magnus tried to rise, to fight, but the poison had spread too quickly. His legendary strength was useless against this internal enemy. "The border violations," he managed to say, his voice rough with pain. "They were bait." "Clever beast," Dominic smiled coldly. "Yes, we needed to test our compound under controlled conditions. What better subject than the Alpha King himself? The treaty you've hidden behind for decades is finished, Magnus. Vidian will no longer share its borders with monsters." As darkness claimed him, Magnus's last coherent thought was not of himself or even his pack, but of the Omega woman he'd left hidden in the forest. Would she escape before these men found her? Had he led her into greater danger by interfering? The irony that he might have failed to protect the very person who'd come seeking to warn him was not lost on Magnus as consciousness slipped away, his powerful body collapsing at the feet of his greatest enemy. In the dungeons beneath Vidian's fortified capital, Magnus regained consciousness slowly, each heartbeat sending waves of silver-poisoned agony through his system. Heavy silver manacles bound his wrists, their touch burning into his flesh, their purpose not just restraint, but constant, deliberate torture. The cell was designed specifically for his kind. Silver-infused bars, floors laid with rowan wood that dampened shapeshifter magic, walls etched with ancient symbols meant to contain preternatural strength. Someone had studied the old ways carefully, combining folk wisdom with modern military precision. Through the haze of pain, Magnus focused on breathing, on remaining present. The poison in his system made it impossible to shift forms, but his enhanced healing was fighting back, keeping him alive though not eliminating the toxin. He had been captured once before, decades earlier during the border wars, but had escaped within hours. This was different. The calculated nature of the trap, the specialized poison, the prepared cell, all pointed to a plan long in development. Dominic hadn't just happened upon him in the forest. He had been the target all along. Voices approached from the corridor outside, and Magnus straightened as much as his chains would allow. Even captive and wounded, he was still Alpha King. He would not be seen cowering. "Remarkable recovery," observed a clinical female voice as a middle-aged woman in healer's robes entered, accompanied by 2 guards. Any human exposed to that dosage would have died instantly. Even a beta wolf would be beyond saving. Magnus remained silent, assessing. The woman wore Vidian colors but carried herself differently than Dominic's soldiers, her eyes sharp with intelligence rather than fear or hatred. "I am Morgana, chief physician to Governor Dominic," she introduced herself with formal precision. "I've been instructed to ensure you survive until your public trial tomorrow." "Trial," Magnus repeated, his voice rough from thirst. "What exactly am I accused of, physician?" "Officially? Violating the border treaty, attacking Vidian soldiers, existing as an abomination against natural order." She spoke the charges without inflection, as if reading a shopping list. "The sentence has been predetermined. Death at dawn the day after tomorrow, unless someone claims you." "Claims me?" The term carried slave connotations that made his wolf rage beneath the suppressing poison. "A formality," Morgana clarified, checking his pulse with impersonal efficiency. "Governor Dominic will offer you for sale at 10 gold sovereigns. No one will pay it, of course. The citizenry fears your kind too much, even in chains." As she worked, Magnus noted that while the guards watched him with evident terror, the physician showed no fear whatsoever. More interestingly, she positioned herself repeatedly to block the guard's view as she slipped something into the water she offered him. "Drink," she said, her eyes meeting his with meaning. "All of it." Magnus complied, detecting a bitter undertaste beneath the water. Almost immediately, the burning pain from the silver manacles dulled slightly. "The compound is still experimental," Morgana continued in her clinical tone, though her words seemed carefully chosen. "Its effects unpredictable, especially when derived from trees rooted in magical soil for centuries, trees your ancestors protected for reasons perhaps more complex than Governor Dominic appreciates." She was trying to tell him something, Magnus realized, something she couldn't say directly under the watchful eyes of Dominic's men. "The forest remembers," he replied carefully, using an old wolf saying. Something flickered in Morgana's eyes, recognition, perhaps. "Indeed," she murmured. Memory runs deeper than blood sometimes. She turned to leave, then paused as if remembering something. Your sister, Princess Alara, remains in protective custody, as per the treaty terms. Governor Dominic has assured me she will not be harmed so long as your pack refrains from retaliation. The implicit threat made Magnus's jaw tighten. Alara had been the diplomatic guest of Vidian court for 5 years, the living guarantee of peace between their peoples. In reality, she was a hostage, though one treated with the respect her rank demanded, until now. After Morgana and the guards departed, Magnus tested his chains methodically, searching for weaknesses. Finding none, he settled into a meditative state his father had taught him, conserving strength while accessing the deeper awareness that connected him to his pack bonds. Most were too distant to reach in his weakened state, but he caught emotional echoes from Cain: determination, planning, loyalty, suggesting his second-in-command was organizing rather than retreating. The faintest thread connected him to Alara, her presence a steady pulse of concern and controlled fear. Hours passed. The dungeon's only window revealed stars wheeling overhead, marking time's passage as Magnus drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams. In one such vision, he saw the Omega woman from the forest standing at a crossroads, her hands glowing with golden light as she faced impossible choices. When dawn finally broke, guards arrived to prepare him for the public trial. They approached cautiously despite his weakened state, their fear evident in over-tightened restraints and unnecessary roughness. As they led him through torch-lit corridors toward the judgment hall, Magnus walked with his head high despite the pain. Whatever spectacle Dominic had planned, the Alpha King would face it with the dignity his position and people deserved. The massive doors to the judgment hall swung open, revealing a vast chamber filled with Vidian nobility. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting the marble floor in fragments of color that Magnus's procession cut through like a ship through choppy waters. In the crowd's expectant faces, Magnus read the full spectrum of human response to his kind: fear, fascination, disgust, morbid excitement. This was entertainment for them, a savage curiosity displayed in chains. For a civilization that considered itself advanced beyond wolfkind's primitive ways, they showed remarkably base instincts. At the chamber's center, a raised dais awaited, and upon it stood Governor Dominic in ceremonial silver robes, his face composed in lines of righteous authority that never reached his calculating eyes. "Kneel the prisoner," he commanded, and guards forced Magnus to his knees before the assembly. As Dominic began a formal recitation of charges, Magnus's attention was drawn to movement near one of the massive pillars supporting the vaulted ceiling. A slender figure in a simple brown dress stood half hidden in shadows, her face a pale oval among the colorful finery of Vidian nobility. The Omega woman from the forest. She had not escaped back to human lands as he'd hoped, but had instead followed him into the very heart of danger. What madness had brought her here, where Omegas were forbidden without noble sponsorship? Their eyes met across the crowded hall, and Magnus felt something electric pass between them, a recognition that transcended their brief encounters. Her scent reached him even through the press of perfumed bodies, herbs, healing, and that indefinable quality his wolf recognized as Omega. He saw the exact moment she recognized him in his human form, her eyes widening fractionally, lips parting in surprise. Then Dominic's hand grasped Magnus's hair, yanking his head back painfully, and the connection broke. "Behold the so-called Alpha King of Silverpine," Dominic proclaimed to the assembled court. Magnus the Untamed, brought low at last. As Dominic continued his performance, Magnus's mind raced. The woman's presence changed everything. If she was discovered, especially if her Omega nature was sensed by the few who would recognize it, she would share his fate, or worse. Yet the fact that she had come, had risked everything, suggested she knew something important enough to warrant such danger. "The sentence is death by silver blade at dawn," Dominic announced, pausing dramatically before adding, "unless someone wishes to claim him. 10 gold sovereigns, and he's yours to do with as you please." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The price was deliberately prohibitive, set high enough to ensure no takers while maintaining the fiction of a fair proceeding. "Come now," Dominic taunted when silence greeted his offer. "Surely someone here has use for an alpha. Think of the work you could extract from him." A few nobles laughed nervously. One young lord stepped forward with evident interest, asking, "What guarantee do we have that he won't tear our throats out the moment those chains are removed?" "None whatsoever," Dominic replied cheerfully. "That's what makes it exciting." More laughter, though edged with unease. Magnus kept his expression neutral, though inwardly his contempt for the proceedings grew. These people who considered themselves civilized were trading in slavery and death while pretending at justice. His eyes sought the Omega woman again, silently willing her to leave, to save herself while she could. Instead, to his horror, she stepped out from behind the pillar, her simple dress marking her clearly as common-born among the silks and brocades of nobility. "Wait!" she called, her voice surprisingly steady despite the audacity of her interruption. Every eye in the judgment hall turned toward her. The weight of their stares would have crushed most, but she stood straight, chin lifted in a posture that spoke of courage rather than defiance. "An Omega," Dominic observed, perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising in mock surprise. "How amusing. Tell me, little Omega, do you have 10 gold sovereigns hidden in that shabby dress?" Whispers erupted through the court at the term Omega, though few present would understand its true significance. To most, it simply meant the lowest social rank, beneath even common beta citizens. The woman's cheeks flushed at the insult, but her voice remained steady. "No, my lord." "Then what exactly are you waiting for?" Dominic's tone dripped condescension. Her eyes found Magnus's again, and he saw in them a strange mixture of determination and something akin to recognition, as if she were seeing through his human form to the wolf beneath. "I'm waiting to make you an offer you can't refuse," she stated clearly. Dominic laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "This should be entertaining. Please, do enlighten us all." Magnus watched her gather herself, sensing the importance of whatever she was about to propose. Whatever game she was playing, he silently willed her to reconsider, to save herself and leave him to his fate. Instead, she spoke words that would alter both their destinies irrevocably. "One night," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent hall. "Give me one night beside him, alone and unchained. If I survive until dawn, you release him into my custody with all charges pardoned." The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Magnus himself could not contain his surprise, understanding instantly both the courage and foolishness of her proposal. "And if you don't survive?" Dominic asked, his interest clearly piqued. "Then you get your execution," she replied simply. "2 bodies instead of 1. Surely that's entertainment enough for the court." From near the doors came a young girl's anguished cry. "Serena, no!" A teenager who shared the woman's features struggled against guards blocking her way. The woman, Serena, flinched at the sound but kept her gaze fixed on Dominic. Magnus felt a strange mixture of admiration and dread. This woman, Serena, was offering herself as sacrifice on the slim chance of saving him, a wolf she barely knew. Whether motivated by remembered gratitude or some deeper Omega instinct, her courage was undeniable. It was also likely to get her killed. In his current poisoned state, with silver toxicity spreading through his system, his control over his wolf form was tenuous at best. Without chains, the transformation might happen involuntarily, and in that feral state, he could not guarantee her safety. "Done!" Dominic clapped his hands together, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "I accept your wager, little Omega. Tonight, you'll be locked in the Eastern Tower with the Beast King. No chains, no guards, no weapons. Just you and him and whatever instincts you possess." He leaned closer to her, adding in a stage whisper all could hear, "I do hope you're a fast runner." The nobles erupted in excited chatter, already placing bets on how long she would last. 2 guards hauled Magnus to his feet, the silver manacles burning with renewed intensity as they dragged him past Serena toward the tower that would serve as their arena. As their paths crossed, he managed to turn his head, catching her gaze one final time. With guards flanking them both, he could say nothing, but mouthed 2 words he hoped she would understand: "Foolish" and "run." Her response was a slight smile, sad but determined, that spoke of fatalistic acceptance of whatever came next. Magnus was led away, his mind racing with equal parts admiration for her courage and fear for what the night would bring. For the first time in decades, the Alpha King found himself praying, not to human gods but to the ancient spirits of wolfkind, that somehow this brave, foolish Omega would survive the night beside him, and that when dawn came, they would both still be human enough to recognize what they had saved in each other. The eastern tower's ancient door closed with the finality of a tomb being sealed. Serena stood motionless, allowing her eyes to adjust to the dim light filtering through the single high window. The circular chamber was spare, stone floor worn smooth by centuries of use, walls of rough-hewn granite, a single torch casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance with lives of their own. And Magnus, even in the half-light, his presence dominated the space. He stood across the room, silver manacles still binding his wrists, though no longer chained to the wall. The tattered remains of what had once been fine clothing hung from his powerful frame, revealing wounds that would have killed an ordinary man. His dark hair fell across features carved from granite, partially obscuring eyes that watched her with an intensity that made her heart race. Not with fear, she realized with surprise, but with something far more complex. "Well," Serena said into the heavy silence, surprised at how steady her voice sounded, "I suppose we should introduce ourselves properly." Magnus's response was a low growl that vibrated through the stone floor and straight into her chest. Not entirely human, not entirely animal, it was the sound of someone fighting for control. "You should not have come here," he finally said, his voice deep and rough from disuse. "This was a foolish bargain." "Perhaps," Serena acknowledged, taking a cautious step forward. "But sometimes mercy must be repaid with mercy." Magnus's eyebrow rose, recognition flickering in his eyes. "The child from the forest," he said softly. "You grew up." "And you remember," she replied with a small smile. "Yes, that was me. You saved my mother's life that day. And now you risk yours for mine." Magnus shook his head. "A poor exchange." Serena took another step forward, her healer's eyes cataloging his wounds. The silver manacles had burned deep into his wrists, leaving raw flesh that no ordinary man could have tolerated. Worse, dark veins spread from those burns, threading up his arms toward his heart. Silver toxicity, advanced and deadly. "The cuffs," she said softly. "They're killing you." "Stay back," Magnus warned, pressing himself against the far wall. "The poison suppresses the shift, but barely. If these come off—" He swallowed hard, and she saw genuine fear in his eyes. "I won't remember you. I'll only know prey." Serena studied him thoughtfully. In the stories villagers told to frighten children, the Wolf King was a monster who devoured human flesh and bathed in blood beneath the full moon. The man before her seemed nothing like that creature of nightmare. Despite his obvious pain, he maintained rigid discipline, more concerned with her safety than his own suffering. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, stepping closer. One dark eyebrow rose in clear skepticism. "Then you're either stupid or suicidal." "Perhaps both," Serena admitted, lowering herself to sit on the cold floor, deliberately making herself smaller, less threatening. "But I didn't save you from execution just to cower in the corner all night." Magnus watched her with a mixture of wariness and reluctant admiration. "Why did you make this bargain? The truth." Serena considered her answer carefully. "I was in your forest last night. I saw Vidian soldiers extracting sap from the silver pines, processing it with blue flame. They mentioned a new weapon against your kind." Magnus's expression darkened. "So that's how they created it." His fingers touched his shoulder where a wound had nearly healed. "The arrow that felled me carried poison unlike any I've encountered. It burns through our system far faster than ordinary silver, affects our ability to maintain control during transformation." "It's more than that," Serena said urgently. "I overheard them planning something larger. They spoke of perfecting a formula, of needing a high-ranking wolf for final testing." "Dominic has long dreamed of cleansing Vidian of our kind," Magnus replied grimly. "He considers us abominations, a threat to human dominance. The treaty has prevented open hostility, but he's been systematically violating its terms for years." Serena rose and cautiously approached him. "Let me examine your wounds. I'm a healer." "A healer who willingly locked herself in a room with a poisoned wolf," Magnus observed dryly, though he didn't retreat as she came closer. The scent of her nearly overwhelmed his senses as she approached. Beneath the expected human notes of soap and herbs lay something primal that called to his wolf nature. Omega. The ancient recognition was undeniable now, though how a true Omega could exist in this age remained a mystery. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to his manacled wrists. After a moment's hesitation, Magnus extended his arms. Serena gasped softly at the full extent of the damage. The silver cuffs had burned deep furrows into his flesh, and dark poisonous veins spread upward toward his heart. "Silver toxicity this advanced," she whispered, her fingers hovering just above the wounds. "How long have you worn these?" 3 days, he answered, jaw clenched against the constant pain. "Since they ambushed my patrol." 3 days of continuous contact with silver would have killed most of his kind within hours. That he still stood, still maintained human form and coherent thought, spoke to strength beyond ordinary measure. "Even if I remove the cuffs," Serena said, meeting his eyes, "the poison is too far advanced. Your system is saturated with it." "I know." The simple acceptance in those 2 words revealed volumes about the man who spoke them. "No," determination hardened her voice. "I didn't come this far to watch you die." Magnus observed her with curiosity. "You're a healer of considerable skill to recognize silver toxicity. Few humans understand our physiology well enough for such diagnosis." Serena busied herself with her medicine pouch, avoiding his gaze. "My grandmother taught me. She understood things others didn't." "Your grandmother was knowledgeable about wolfkind?" "She was burned for it," Serena replied quietly, crushing herbs between her palms. Understanding dawned in Magnus's eyes. "I'm sorry. Humans fear what they don't understand, and what they fear, they destroy." "Sometimes we do the same," Serena acknowledged, preparing a paste from the crushed herbs. "Fear is the true enemy, not differences in form or nature." As she worked, applying the herbal mixture to the burns around the cuffs, Magnus found himself watching her with growing fascination. In 63 years of life, 45 spent in human form, he had rarely encountered such acceptance from one not of wolf blood. Dominic's hatred was more common, though usually less lethal in its execution. "These poultices will help temporarily," Serena explained, "but we need to remove the manacles. The continuous contact is preventing your body from fighting the poison." Magnus caught her wrist as she reached for the buckles, not roughly but firmly enough to stop her. "Don't!" he warned, his voice dropping to something gravelly and inhuman. "When these come off, I won't be able to control it." "Control what?" "The beast." His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw naked fear there. "The silver's been suppressing the shift, but as it spreads, when it reaches my heart..." He swallowed hard. "I won't remember you. I'll only know prey." Serena didn't pull away from his grip. "Then we'll manage it together." "You don't understand." "I understand that silver toxicity will kill you within hours," Serena interrupted firmly. "Let me help you, please." The request hung between them, simple and profound. Magnus studied her face, finding no trace of the fear he expected. Finally, he nodded once and released her wrist. The buckles were stiff with blood, but Serena's fingers worked nimbly. As the first cuff fell away with a metallic clang, Magnus hissed, a sound more wolf than human. Relief and agony warred across his features as poisoned blood flowed more freely through the damaged tissues. "One more," Serena murmured, working on the second manacle. When it fell away, Magnus's entire body convulsed. He doubled over, arms wrapped around his middle as if holding himself together through sheer force of will. When he straightened, his eyes were no longer gray. They burned molten gold in the torchlight. "Magnus?" Serena whispered, taking an instinctive step back. The growl that answered was purely animal, resonating in the chamber's ancient stones. His body began to change, bones cracking and reforming beneath his skin. But the transformation stalled halfway, leaving him trapped in a horrifying middle state, too human to be wolf, too wolf to be human. His face had elongated into the beginnings of a muzzle, filled with teeth that could tear through bone. Coarse silver-gray fur sprouted in patches across skin that rippled with aborted transformation. "Magnus, listen to me!" Serena pressed her back against the wall, maintaining distance while speaking in a calm, measured tone. "You're still in there. Fight it." The creature that had been Magnus swayed on its feet, those golden eyes fixed on her with feral intensity, nostrils flaring as they drank in her scent. A low whine escaped its throat, followed by a snarl of confusion and pain. It was the poison, Serena realized. The silver toxicity had trapped him between forms, driving him mad with pain and primal instincts. He was suffering, and in that suffering he saw only threat and prey. The creature lunged. Serena dove to the side, feeling claws whistle past her shoulder. She rolled and came up running, circling the chamber desperately. Magnus, or what remained of him, stalked her with predatory patience, cutting off escape routes with cunning that transcended bestial instinct. Then she remembered something her grandmother had taught her about wolves. They responded to hierarchy, to signals of dominance and submission. It went against every survival instinct, but Serena forced herself to stop running. She dropped to her knees in the center of the room and bowed her head, exposing her neck. "I submit," she whispered. "I'm not your enemy." The creature's growling stopped. Serena heard the pad of its feet approaching, felt hot breath against her neck. Every muscle screamed at her to run, to fight, to do anything but remain motionless as death approached. Instead of violence, she felt something unexpected. A cold, wet nose pressed against her neck, sniffing curiously. Then the creature's head rubbed against her shoulder, almost affectionate in its contact. Serena's eyes flew open in shock. The hybrid creature was nuzzling her like a dog seeking comfort. The golden eyes still held pain and confusion, but no hostility. "That's it," she breathed, slowly raising one trembling hand. "You remember?" Her fingers made contact with soft fur, and the creature leaned into her touch, a rumbling sound like a purr vibrating from its chest. "We need to purge the silver from your blood," she murmured, continuing to stroke his head, as one might soothe a frightened animal. "It's driving you mad, trapping you between forms, but I can help." As she spoke, Serena gathered her courage for what came next. The herbal remedies in her pouch might slow the poison's spread, but they couldn't eliminate it. For that, she would need to use the power she'd hidden all her life, the gift that had sent her grandmother to the pyre. "This may feel strange," she warned, though she wasn't certain how much Magnus understood in his current state. "But I need you to stay calm." Slowly, Serena placed both hands on either side of the creature's face, looking directly into those golden eyes. Something ancient and instinctual passed between them, Omega to Alpha, healer to guardian, a recognition that transcended rational thought. Then Serena closed her eyes and reached for the golden warmth that lived in her center, the power she'd spent a lifetime hiding. It rose eagerly at her call, flowing through her body and into her palms, which began to glow with soft golden light. The hybrid creature stiffened at first contact, a startled growl rumbling in its chest. But as the healing warmth seeped into its system, the growl transformed into a sound of relief. Under her hands, Serena could feel the corrupted energy of the silver poison, a cold blue presence spreading through Magnus's body like ice through water. Her golden energy met it, surrounding the poison, containing it, beginning the slow process of neutralization. The tower door burst open with a bang that made them both jump. A young noble stood in the doorway, a crossbow aimed at Magnus's chest. Behind him, Dominic's voice rang out. "I knew she'd be dead by now. Finish it. Kill the beast." "No!" Serena threw herself between the crossbow and Magnus. "Don't shoot!" The noble's eyes widened at finding her alive. "Move, Omega. That thing will kill you." "He's not a thing," Serena snarled with unexpected ferocity. "And he won't kill anyone." Behind her, Magnus's growl rumbled through the floor. She felt him move, felt his body press against her back protectively. Through the brief healing contact they'd shared, something had awakened in both of them, a connection that defied rational explanation. Fascinating. Dominic appeared in the doorway, his face alight with intellectual curiosity that held no warmth. The beast has bonded to its prey, how unexpected. He studied them with the clinical interest of a scientist observing specimens. "The wager was until dawn," Serena reminded him, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Hours remain before sunrise. You're breaking your own terms by interfering." "The wager," Dominic replied smoothly, "assumed you'd be dead by now. Clearly we underestimated you." He nodded to the noble. "Fire." The young lord's finger tightened on the trigger. In that fractional moment, Serena made a decision that would alter not just this night, but the course of her entire existence. Without conscious thought, her hand reached behind her, fingers burying themselves in the thick fur at Magnus's neck. Power erupted from her palm, bright and golden as sunlight. It poured into Magnus, and through their connection, she felt his agony as if it were her own, felt the silver poison burning through his veins, felt the beast's confusion as if it were her own. Healer's magic, the forbidden gift that had caused her grandmother to be burned as a witch. But for him, she would break every vow of secrecy she'd made to herself. The crossbow bolt struck Magnus's shoulder and bounced off harmlessly, deflected by a shield of golden light. Dominic's eyes widened in shock and something that looked like covetous greed. "A healer," he breathed. "A true healer, Omega." He never finished the thought. Magnus, his body flooded with Serena's healing energy, completed his transformation in a burst of light. The full wolf that emerged was magnificent, the size of a small horse, silver-gray fur rippling with golden energy. His eyes were no longer feral gold, but clear, aware gray once more. The young noble dropped the crossbow and fled. Dominic attempted to follow, but Magnus was faster, placing himself between the governor and Serena, teeth bared in a snarl that promised death. "Call off your beast, healer," Dominic demanded, though his voice shook, "or I'll have the entire royal guard here within minutes." "He's not my beast," Serena said quietly, exhausted from the magical expenditure. "He's his own person, and I think you should leave." For a moment, Dominic looked like he might argue. Then Magnus took one deliberate step forward, and the governor fled, the door slamming behind him. The moment they were alone, Magnus's form shimmered and shifted. In seconds, a man knelt before her, naked, panting, his wounds partially healed but his eyes clear and aware. "You saved me," he whispered, wonder in his voice. "Again." "You protected me," Serena replied, reaching out to touch his face, "even when the poison had you in its grip." Magnus's hand came up to cover hers. "What are you?" he asked softly. Serena smiled tiredly. "I could ask the same of you." Before Magnus could respond, his expression changed dramatically. His eyes widened, his nostrils flared, and he leaned close, breathing deeply. "Your scent," he said, his voice suddenly rough. "It's changing." "How?" His eyes flashed gold again, but differently this time. Not poison madness, but something more primal, more aware. "No," he said, horror dawning on his face. "What did I—" His hand moved to her neck, and Serena gasped as his fingers found a wound she hadn't realized was there. When he pulled his hand away, blood stained his fingertips. "When?" she whispered. "When you healed me," Magnus answered, his voice breaking. "When our magics touched, I lost control for just a moment." He looked at her with devastation etched across his features. "Serena, I'm so sorry. I marked you." "Marked me? What does that mean?" "I claimed you as mate," Magnus explained, each word clearly painful to speak. "It's an alpha's mark, meant to begin the bonding process between wolves." Cold fear washed through Serena. "And if the bond isn't completed?" Magnus's next words confirmed her worst fears. "You'll die within 3 days." Serena's hand trembled as she touched the bite mark on her neck. The skin around it felt hot, and thin black veins spread from the wound like cracks in glass. 3 days, she repeated numbly. Magnus paced the tower room, running his hands through his dark hair in agitation. He'd wrapped himself in torn remnants of his clothes, dignity reasserting itself despite the circumstances. "An alpha's claiming mark bonds 2 souls, he explained, his voice tight with self-recrimination. "It's meant to be mutual, consensual, completed with both parties willing and aware." His voice cracked. "What I did, marking you without consent, it's incomplete. The bond is trying to form but can't. It will consume you. Can't you just mark me again properly this time?" "It doesn't work that way." Magnus stopped pacing, turning to face her with anguish evident in every line of his body. "To complete it, you would have to mark me in return. But you're human, Serena. You don't have the strength or the equipment." He stopped suddenly, studying her with new intensity. "Wait, the healing magic. You're not just human, are you?" Before Serena could answer, footsteps echoed in the stairwell outside. Magnus positioned himself between Serena and the door, tension radiating from him in waves. When the door opened, it was a woman in deep purple robes, flanked by guards. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Serena recognized the physician who had examined Magnus in his cell. "I am Morgana," she announced formally, "Chief Physician to the Crown. Lord Dominic witnessed your display of magic and has requested I examine you both." "I'm fine," Serena said quickly, stepping up beside Magnus rather than remaining behind his protection. Morgana's sharp eyes missed nothing. She stepped closer, ignoring the low growl that rumbled from Magnus's chest. "Peace, Alpha King," she said calmly. "I mean her no harm, but Lord Dominic has questions about healer magic and alpha bonds." The way she said it made Serena's skin crawl. "What does Dominic really want?" Magnus demanded, not moving from his protective stance. Morgana's expression flickered with something like concern. "Lord Dominic is interested in many things," she said carefully, glancing at the guards flanking her. "The nature of bonds, the properties of shifter blood, the military applications of both." She paused meaningfully. "Especially when combined with healer magic." Serena's blood ran cold. "Why?" "Because he's been developing a weapon," Morgana said quietly, lowering her voice. "A poison that specifically targets shifters. He's been testing it on captured wolves, the ones disappearing from border villages." Magnus's growl deepened. "Genocide." "It gets worse," Morgana continued, her professional demeanor cracking slightly to reveal genuine concern. "The poison works, but some shifters are developing resistance. Dominic needs alpha blood, your blood specifically, to perfect it." She looked at Serena with something close to pity. "And now he knows there's a healer who might counteract it. He'll use you to test the poison until even your magic can't stop it. Then he'll unleash it on every shifter settlement." "Starting with my pack," Magnus finished hollowly. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably. "Magister, we should return." "I know." Morgana pulled out a small knife and pricked her own finger, letting blood fall into a vial she produced from her robes. "There, I have my sample." She held Serena's gaze meaningfully. "I'll report the Omega shows no bond mark, no magic, just a foolish girl who got lucky." "Why help us?" Magnus asked, suspicion clear in his voice. "Because I took an oath to heal, not to help monsters commit genocide." Morgana moved toward the door, then paused. "When you leave this tower at dawn, go east through the servants' quarters. There's less traffic, and your sister is being held in the lower kitchens. I'll see she's moved somewhere safer." It was a warning, an escape route, and a promise of alliance all in one. "We can't trust her," Magnus said once they were alone. "What choice do we have?" Serena pressed her hand against the bite mark, feeling the heat spreading beneath her fingers. Before Magnus could answer, the door burst open. This time it was Dominic himself, his face twisted with rage, flanked by a half-dozen armed guards. "Morgana says you're clean," he spat at Serena. "I don't believe her." His hand shot out, grabbing Serena's jaw and forcing her head to the side. His eyes widened at the sight of the bite mark. "There," he breathed triumphantly. "You're bonded. You're his mate." Magnus moved with supernatural speed, slamming Dominic against the wall, forearm pressed against the governor's throat. "Don't touch her!" Guards poured into the room, crossbows raised. "Stand down, beast," Dominic wheezed, "or I'll have her shot. Not to kill, just enough to hurt." Magnus's body shook with barely restrained violence, but he stepped back, releasing Dominic. "Better." The governor smoothed his robes, a cold smile spreading across his face. "Here's the new arrangement. You, Alpha King, will provide blood samples daily, and you, Healer, will demonstrate your gift on shifter prisoners." His smile was poisonous with triumph. "Refuse and I'll execute your sister and mine. I have both girls in custody now." Serena's world tilted. "Lily too?" "And Princess Alara violated the treaty by attempting to rescue her brother," Dominic said pleasantly. "Now who wants to cooperate first?" The laboratory beneath Avidian Court was a nightmare given physical form. Serena counted 7 cages, each containing a shifter in various stages of poisoning. Their whimpers echoed off stone walls, a chorus of suffering that made her healing instincts scream for action. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Dominic gestured at his collection like a proud collector displaying rare art. 3 years of research." He pulled a vial from a cabinet. The liquid inside was viscous and black, shot through with silver that seemed to move of its own accord. "Aconitum mortis, wolf's bane extract enhanced with alchemical silver," he explained with clinical detachment. 1 drop causes paralysis. 2 drops cause organ failure." He pointed to a corner cage where a young woman lay motionless except for shallow breathing. Black veins covered every visible inch of skin. "She received 3 drops 4 hours ago. I estimate another hour before her heart stops." He fixed Serena with a cold stare. "Unless your healing magic can save her." Serena's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "This is monstrous." "This is progress," Dominic corrected, his eyes gleaming with zealous conviction. "Shifters are an aberration. We're simply correcting nature's mistake." "By torturing civilians," Magnus's voice was deadly quiet. They'd chained him to the wall with silver-reinforced manacles, the metal already burning his wrists, despite Serena's earlier healing. His face had gone pale with barely contained rage as he surveyed the laboratory. "These are farmers, families, children," Dominic countered dismissively. He turned to his assistant. "Bring the Alpha's sister." The door opened, and guards dragged in a struggling young woman with Magnus's gray eyes. Her hands were bound, her clothes torn, but she held her head high, defiance in every line of her body. "Alara," Magnus breathed, his face draining of all color. "Here's what's happening," Dominic announced, his tone suggesting he was being eminently reasonable. "You will let Peter drain a pint of your blood," he nodded toward Magnus. "And you," he turned to Serena, "will save the dying shifter. If either refuses or fails, I inject Princess Alara with a fatal dose." Serena met Magnus's eyes across the laboratory. She saw his anguish, his helplessness, his silent apology for involving her in this nightmare. "Understood," Serena whispered. The next hour was horror beyond anything Serena had experienced. She knelt beside the cage containing the dying shifter, her hands pressed against the woman's skin, pouring healing magic into a body that was more poison than blood. She felt the woman's pain as her own, felt organs shutting down one by one, and she felt the poison itself, an intelligent, adaptive force designed to resist healing. It seemed almost alive, learning from her attempts to neutralize it, mutating to preserve itself. "Fascinating," Dominic murmured, taking notes. "The healing magic slows the poison but doesn't eliminate it. The shifter's regeneration actually feeds the toxin." He glanced at Magnus, whose blood was being collected in a series of vials. "Alpha blood will make it even more potent." "She's dying!" Serena gasped, sweat pouring down her face as she fought a losing battle against the relentless poison. "Then she dies," Dominic said without emotion. "No." The word came not from Serena or Magnus, but from Alara. "Serena, stop. Look at your hands." Serena looked down and cried out. Black veins identical to those on the poisoned shifter were spreading up her arms. The bite mark on her neck was bleeding again, the dark tendrils reaching toward her heart. "The bond is siphoning your energy," Alara explained urgently. "Without completion, every time you use magic, you're feeding the mark instead of yourself. You'll burn out." "Excellent observation," Dominic said, his scientific curiosity clearly piqued. "Which brings us to the next phase of research. What happens when a bonded pair is kept apart?" He nodded to guards. "Take the Alpha King to the eastern cells. The healer stays." "No!" Magnus fought his chains with such violence that stone cracked around the anchoring bolts. "Dominic, the bond will kill her." "I know," Dominic said cheerfully. "That's the point." As guards began dragging Magnus away, a commotion erupted from the corridor outside, shouting, the clash of steel on steel, then an explosion that shook dust from the ceiling. Dominic's face went white. "What now?" he hissed. The laboratory door exploded inward. Through the smoke stepped a massive gray wolf, flanked by a dozen others. They moved with military precision, fanning out to cover the room. The lead wolf shimmered and shifted, becoming a man, bare-chested, battle-scarred, his eyes cold with controlled rage. "Commander Kane," Magnus said, relief evident in his voice. "Release my king," Kane snarled at Dominic, "or I paint these walls with your entrails." Chaos erupted. Guards fired crossbows, but the shifters moved like liquid shadow, disarming them with brutal efficiency. Kane himself ripped Magnus's chains from the wall as if they were made of paper. "Can you shift?" he asked urgently. "Not safely," Magnus gasped, holding up his wrists where silver poisoning still spread. "The toxin in my blood, if I shift, it'll become airborne." "Then we carry you," Kane whistled sharply to another wolf, who shimmered into human form to support Magnus's weight. He turned to Serena, eyes narrowed with assessment. "You're the healer. Come." "The others," Serena gestured at the cages where shifters watched with desperate hope. "We can't leave them." "No time," Kane said grimly, already moving toward the exit. But Serena was already at the cages, fumbling with locks. "I won't leave them to die." Magnus's weak voice added unexpected support. "Take them all. No one gets left behind." Kane looked like he might argue, but the authority in Magnus's voice, even weakened, brooked no defiance. "Fine. Everyone grab a prisoner. Move." They ran through smoke-filled corridors, alarm bells clanging throughout the fortress. Guards shouted, and the occasional arrow whistled past, but the pack moved with coordinated precision, protecting their wounded and their rescuers alike. Serena's legs burned, her body weakening with each step as the incomplete bond drained her strength. The black veins had crawled past her elbow now, creeping inexorably toward her heart. Through her connection with Magnus, she could feel his weakness matching her own, could sense that the incomplete bond was draining them both, though in different ways. They burst from the castle into the gray dawn light. Horses waited, and wolves, dozens of them, a full pack mobilized for war. Among them, Serena spotted Lily being helped onto a horse by a kind-faced wolf in human form. "Lily!" Serena gasped in relief. "The pack rescued me from the kitchens before the main assault," Lily called back. "I'm okay, Serena." "The forest!" Magnus gasped as they helped him mount. "Once we reach Silverpine territory." An arrow whistled past Serena's ear. She turned to see the young noble from the tower leading mounted guards in pursuit. Dominic rode beside him, murder in his eyes. "Kill the healer!" Dominic screamed, his face contorted with rage. "I need her dead. Her blood will complete my research." More arrows flew. One struck Serena's wounded shoulder, spinning her around. She fell hard, pain exploding through her body. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Magnus's anguished face, his hand reaching for her, even as Cain pulled him to safety. Then nothing but the black void of unconsciousness as the incomplete bond consumed what remained of her strength. Serena woke to softness. After the ordeal in Dominic's castle, the sensation was so foreign that for a moment she wondered if she had died. But pain existed in dreams, and her shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, a steady reminder that she remained among the living. "Easy," a gentle voice cautioned as she tried to rise. Firm hands pressed her back down. "The arrow's out, but you lost blood, and that's the least of your concerns." Serena's vision focused slowly. She lay in a circular room with wooden walls carved with intricate patterns of wolves and moons. Dried herbs hung from rafters, their familiar scents grounding her. The woman tending her was perhaps 60, with silver hair braided with feathers and beads that clicked softly when she moved. "Where am I?" Serena managed, her voice a dry whisper. "Silverpine territory," the woman replied, helping her drink from a wooden cup. The liquid tasted of mint and something deeper, more primal. "My healing house in the heart of Packlands. I'm Sylvia, High Priestess of the Moon Temple and Keeper of Bond Magic." She studied Serena with eyes that seemed to see beyond physical form. "You're safe. Dominic can't reach you here." Memory flooded back, the escape, the arrow falling. "Lily, my sister?" "Safe too, sleeping in the next room." Sylvia's expression softened. "She has spirit, that one. Argued with 3 senior wolves who tried to separate her from you." Relief washed through Serena, quickly followed by a searing pain that radiated from her neck. Her hand flew to the bite mark, finding it hot to the touch, the skin around it tight and feverish. "Magnus?" she asked, already knowing the answer from the gnawing emptiness she felt. Sylvia's expression grew grave. "The Alpha King lives. Barely. Bond separation and lingering silver toxicity are killing him." She paused, her eyes fixed on the mark at Serena's neck. "It's killing you both." Serena struggled to sit, ignoring the priestess's protests. The room spun briefly, then steadied. Looking down, she saw black veins spreading across her chest, reaching toward her heart like seeking tendrils. "How long do I have?" she whispered. "A day, perhaps less." Sylvia pulled a leather-bound book from a nearby shelf, its cover worn with age and use. When an alpha marks an omega without proper ritual, the bond becomes parasitic instead of symbiotic. Instead of 2 souls supporting each other, the mark tries to consume the weaker soul. In this case, you. Serena touched the mark again, feeling it pulse beneath her fingers. "To complete the bond, I would need to mark him in return," she said, remembering Magnus's words in the tower. "Yes, but you're human, Serena," Sylvia replied, flipping through ancient pages. "You don't have an alpha's strength or bite or the ability to forge soul bonds." "But I have magic," Serena protested. "My healing magic is keeping you alive longer than any human should survive an incomplete bond," Sylvia interrupted. "But it's also why Magnus keeps away." A new voice spoke from the doorway. Serena turned to see a young woman with Magnus's gray eyes watching her. Despite the simple clothing she wore, she carried herself with unmistakable dignity. Alara, Magnus's sister. "What do you mean?" Serena asked. "My brother believes proximity makes the incomplete bond worse," Alara explained, stepping into the room. that his presence is killing you faster. He's ordered that you be kept comfortable, and that under no circumstances is he to be told when you die." "That noble idiot," Serena breathed. "It runs in the family," Alara said with a sad smile. She sat on the edge of Serena's bed, studying her with frank curiosity. "I've never met a human who would risk everything for one of us. Why did you do it?" Serena considered this question. "He saved me once when I was a child, but it was more than repaying a debt." She looked at her hands, remembering how the golden healing light had flowed from them into Magnus. "I saw something in him worth saving. Dominic called him a monster, but all I saw was someone willing to suffer to protect others." Alara's expression softened. "You see clearly for a human." "Where is he now?" Serena asked. Alara and Sylvia exchanged glances. "The Moon Temple," Alara finally answered, "preparing for the severance ritual." Ice flooded Serena's veins. "Severance? The only way to save your life," Sylvia explained. "If Magnus severs the bond before it kills you, you'll be free. You'll live." She hesitated before adding, "The process will likely kill him. His wolf won't survive losing its mate, but you'll survive." "No!" Serena tried to stand, gasping as pain lanced through her wounded shoulder. "You can't let him do that." "You don't have a choice," Alara said gently. "The ritual begins at moonrise, less than an hour from now." Serena looked between them desperately. Her mind raced, searching for alternatives. "You said I don't have an alpha's bite, that I'm too weak to complete the bond." She grabbed Sylvia's hand. "But what if I'm not trying to complete it as a human? What if I complete it as something else?" Understanding dawned in Sylvia's ancient eyes. "The transformation," she whispered. "You're suggesting you undergo the change, become like us. Can it work?" "Theoretically," Sylvia's brow furrowed. "But Serena, you've already been marked, already partially bonded. A human body can't survive both bond formation and species transformation simultaneously." "What are my odds?" Serena asked bluntly. Sylvia hesitated. 1 in 50. "And if I do nothing?" "You die today, certainly." Serena met her eyes steadily. "Then I'll take 1 in 50 over 0. Show me how." "You stubborn, brave fool," Alara whispered. "You're perfect for my brother." Sylvia studied Serena for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well, but we must hurry. The transformation takes 45 minutes with the blood moon's power, and if Magnus completes the severance before you finish..." They dressed Serena in a white robe and led her through the pack village. Twilight was falling, bathing everything in blue-gold light. Shifters stopped to watch her pass, expressions ranging from curiosity to pity to open hostility. A human in their sacred spaces was unprecedented. A human attempting transformation was unheard of. The transformation chamber was underground, carved from living rock beneath the oldest silver pine in the forest. Sigils covered every surface, glowing with soft blue light. In the center stood a pool of water that looked like liquid starlight, its surface unnaturally still despite the air currents that moved through the chamber. "The pool is fed by the sacred spring," Sylvia explained, helping Serena undress. "It contains concentrated wolf essence, the pure magic that makes us what we are." Alara handed Sylvia a silver knife. The priestess cut her palm, allowing blood to drip into the pool. The droplets didn't break the surface, but seemed to sink through it like stones through mercury. "My blood carries the royal line," Alara explained. "It will help your body accept the transformation." "Immersion will trigger the change," Sylvia continued, gripping Serena's shoulders. "But Serena, it will hurt more than anything you've experienced. Your bones will break and reform. Your muscles will tear and rebuild. Your very soul will be reshaped." "I understand," Serena said, steeling herself. "If you survive," Sylvia said quietly, "you'll be wolf forever. You can never return to your human life. Is this worth that sacrifice?" Serena thought of her quiet life in Ashevale, everything she'd known. Then she thought of Magnus, his eyes, his gentle strength, the way he'd defended her even when poison drove him mad, the way he was now willing to die to save her. "Yes," she whispered, "it's worth everything." She stepped to the pool's edge, the liquid starlight reflecting in her eyes. With one final breath as a human, Serena stepped forward. The water's surface broke with barely a ripple, but the moment it touched her skin, agony exploded through every nerve. Serena opened her mouth to scream, and liquid rushed in, burning like liquid fire. Her body convulsed as bones began to crack and reshape, as muscle tore from bone only to reattach in new configurations. Dimly, she was aware of Sylvia and Alara chanting in an ancient language, their voices seeming to come from miles away. The black veins from Magnus's mark pulsed and spread faster, fighting the transformation, two powerful magics battling for dominance within her fragile human form. Through the haze of pain, Serena reached for the golden healing power that had been her birthright. It responded sluggishly at first, then with growing strength, surrounding the black tendrils, containing them, giving her body the strength to continue the impossible transformation. The last coherent thought she had was, "Please let me survive. Please let me save him." Then there was only darkness and transformation and the distant sound of wolves howling at the rising blood moon. Magnus knelt on cold stone in the moon temple, his body trembling with fever and weakness. The sacred space was ancient, carved from a single massive tree that had died 1,000 years ago but refused to fall. Moonlight streamed through gaps in the wooden walls, painting patterns on the floor that shifted with arcane meaning. Around him, 7 elder priestesses chanted in the old tongue, their voices rising and falling in cadences that spoke to something primal in his wolf nature. The silver poison in his system made it difficult to focus, but Magnus forced himself to remain present. This final duty to his people, and to Serena, demanded nothing less than his full attention. On the altar before him lay a silver knife, blessed silver that could cut bonds instead of flesh. Such blades were rare, crafted only for the most solemn rituals. This one had been used only 3 times in the pack's recorded history, each instance marking tragedy and sacrifice. "Are you certain, Alpha King?" The eldest priestess, Keeper Isolde, stood before him with the knife. Her face, lined with the wisdom of 9 decades, showed compassion, but no weakness. "Once the bond is severed, there is no remaking it. Your wolf will die. You will die, but she will live." "I'm certain," Magnus said, though the words tasted like ash. Every cell in his body screamed against this action, his wolf howling at the thought of losing its mate. But he had already nearly killed her once with that mark. He wouldn't do it again. "Then we begin." Isolde raised the knife. "When I cut the bond thread, you must not fight it. Let it go cleanly, or the human will suffer more." Magnus closed his eyes, reaching for the silver thread that connected his soul to Serena's. Even weakened by distance and the incomplete nature of their bond, he could feel her through it, her pain, her fear, but also her determination, burning like a beacon. "I'm sorry," he whispered across the distance. The bond suddenly flared white-hot. Magnus gasped, his eyes flying open. Through the connection, he felt something massive happening to Serena, a transformation so profound it transcended physical boundaries. "No," he breathed in horror. "Serena, don't." "What's happening?" Isolde demanded, lowering the knife. "She's trying to become like us," Magnus said, awe and terror warring in his voice. "She's transforming so she can complete the bond." The priestess's chanting faltered. "That's impossible," one whispered. "No human can survive transformation while bonded." "I know." Magnus was on his feet despite his weakness. "I have to stop her." Pain exploded through the bond, not his pain, but hers. Magnus collapsed, feeling Serena's agony as his own. He felt her bones breaking, her muscles tearing, her human form dying, and he felt her failing. "The transformation is killing her," Isolde said grimly, pressing her hand to his forehead. "She's not strong enough. The bond is draining her life force faster than the pool can rebuild it." "Then give her mine!" Magnus grabbed the silver knife and drew it across his palm without hesitation. Blood welled up, glowing faintly with alpha power. "If you feed her your strength, you'll die," Isolde said flatly. "You don't have enough life force for both." "I don't care." Magnus pressed his bleeding palm to his chest over his heart. "Bond magic works both ways. I can send energy as easily as receive it." "In theory," Isolde hesitated. "That's an order, Keeper," Magnus commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of his position despite his weakened state. Isolde nodded reluctantly. "As you command, my king." She began to chant again, different words, a pattern meant to reverse bond energy flow. Magnus felt the shift immediately. The bond, which had been pulling from Serena, began pulling from him instead. His life force poured down that silver thread, rushing to fill the void where Serena's human self was dying. The pain was exquisite. Every breath became a battle as his strength drained away. He felt his body shutting down, felt his wolf retreating deeper, conserving what little energy remained. But through the bond, he also felt Serena's transformation accelerating, felt her bones finishing their reshaping, her muscles completing reconstruction, felt the moment when her human body died and a wolf was born. The bond suddenly flooded with power, not his flowing to her, but hers flowing to him. Strong, pure, blazing with healer magic and wolf essence combined into something entirely new. Impossible, one priestess breathed. Through the temple doors burst a wolf unlike any Magnus had seen in his long life. She was smaller than pack wolves, with fur the color of moonlight on snow and eyes that glowed gold with healer magic. The aura surrounding her was pure, radiant, powerful enough to make the temple's sacred wards shimmer in response. She shifted mid-stride, becoming a woman with silver-white hair and golden eyes. Naked and covered in transformation blood, she nonetheless radiated power that made the priestesses step back in awe. "Serena," Magnus breathed. She crossed the temple in 3 strides and dropped to her knees beside him, her hands cupping his face. Through the now complete bond, he felt her emotions as clearly as his own: determination, relief, fierce joy, and something deeper, something that made his heart race despite his exhaustion. "You were going to sever the bond," she said. "You were going to die to save me." "You're worth it," he said simply. "You beautiful idiot." Her thumb traced his cheekbone. "I'm not worth your life. You're worth everything." Magnus's hand covered hers. "Serena, I'm sorry for marking you without consent, for nearly killing you." She silenced him by pressing her lips to his. The kiss was brief but sent shockwaves through their newly strengthened bond. "I consent," she whispered against his mouth. "I understand what the bond means now. I understand what we could be together." Her golden eyes searched his. "I choose you, Magnus. I choose this. So stop apologizing and let me finish what you started." "The claiming," Isolde said quietly. "Through the completed bond, you'll be able to speak mind to mind, a gift of true mates." Magnus's heart thundered in his chest. "Serena, are you sure? Once done, it's permanent. Forever." "I know," she smiled, fierce and wild in a way that took his breath away. "Sounds perfect." She leaned in, her lips finding the spot where his neck met his shoulder. Magnus tilted his head, offering his throat in submission and trust. When her teeth, now sharp with her new wolf nature, sank into his flesh, the world exploded into light and sensation. The incomplete bond shattered, and in its place formed something new, something unbreakable, 2 souls becoming one. "Mine," Serena whispered, the word echoing in both their minds. "Yours," Magnus answered, the temple singing with the power of a completed bond. For 3 heartbeats, there was only light, and the overwhelming completeness of 2 souls merged into one. Magnus felt Serena's thoughts as clearly as his own, felt her love and relief and fierce protective joy. And through their new connection, she could speak directly into his mind. "Is this real?" her thoughts asked. "As real as breathing," he answered silently. "We're bonded forever, Alpha and Omega, as it was in the ancient days." Then the vision hit them both. Through the completed bond, enhanced by Serena's healer sight, they saw Dominic, not in Vidian Court, but closer. He was in Silver Pine territory with 50 soldiers, each carrying vials of perfected poison. They rode hard toward the pack village, following the trail left by the rescue party. "He's coming!" Serena gasped aloud, pulling back from Magnus's shoulder. Blood stained her lips, but the bite mark on his neck was already healing, leaving a silver scar that matched hers. "He knows where we are." Magnus was on his feet instantly, the bond flooding him with strength. The lingering effects of silver toxicity burned away under the power of their completed connection. "How long?" he asked, mind already shifting to battle strategy. Serena closed her eyes, letting her new wolf senses stretch outward. "An hour, maybe less," she said. "And Magnus? He's going to poison the water supply. The sacred spring feeds the village. If he succeeds, the whole pack dies." Magnus's hands clenched into fists. "We need to evacuate. Kane can organize—" "There's no time," Isolde interrupted. "The spring is only 10 minutes from here, but the village evacuation would take hours." "Then we stop him," Serena said simply. She turned to Magnus, her eyes glowing with newfound power. "You said the bond goes both ways now, that we can share strength and abilities. Yes, Magnus answered, understanding dawning. What are you thinking? She smiled, all wolf now. I'm a healer who can sense poison at a distance. You're an alpha who moves faster than any human. Together, she held out her hand, we're unstoppable. Magnus took her hand, and the bond flared bright between them. Together, he agreed. Outside the temple, they shifted forms simultaneously. Magnus into his silver-gray wolf, Serena into her smaller moonlight white one. Through the bond, they moved as one entity, Serena's healer senses guiding them, while Magnus's predator instincts plotted the most efficient route. Behind them, the pack mobilized with practiced efficiency. Cain rallied warriors while Ilara organized village defenses. Sylvia began a protective ward around the sacred spring, a temporary barrier that might hold minutes, not hours, against concentrated poison. There, Serena's voice echoed in Magnus's mind through their bond. I smell the poison. 30 soldiers ahead, with Dominic in the center. Can you sense which ones carry the vials? Magnus asked, slowing their advance as they approached the enemy's position. Serena's consciousness expanded, her healer magic flowing through the bond and amplifying Magnus's acute senses. Suddenly they could see with perfect clarity. Heat signatures, heartbeats, the chemical scent of wolfsbane and silver. Dominic has the master vial on his belt, Serena reported. But 5 soldiers each carry backup doses. We need to take them all simultaneously or they'll dump the poison out of spite. We need the pack, Magnus decided. As if summoned by their alpha's need, wolves poured from the forest around them, not just warriors, but the entire pack. Elders who could still fight, adolescents eager to defend their home, even Lily, riding alongside Ilara, armed with a bow and determination beyond her years. My king, Cain's mental voice was filled with fierce loyalty. We stand with you. Magnus's heart swelled with pride in his people. Then let's end this. The attack was swift and coordinated, pack wolves emerging from the undergrowth on all sides, surrounding Dominic's forces before they realized the danger. Soldiers raised crossbows, but they were trained to fight humans, not supernatural packmates moving with hive-mind precision. Serena had never fought in wolf form, never experienced battle of any kind. But through the bond, Magnus's battle instincts guided her. She moved like liquid shadow, disarming soldiers before they could fire, using her smaller size and speed to advantage. But her real target was Dominic. The governor stood at the center of his collapsing formation, the master vial held high. "Call them off, Beast King," he screamed. "Call them off or I dump this entire vial in the stream." Magnus shifted to human form, standing unafraid before his enemy. "You'll die if you do. My pack won't let you leave this forest alive." "Then we all die together," Dominic snarled, his face twisted with hatred and zealotry. "If I can't purge the world of your corruption, at least I can take your pack with me." His hand tilted, the vial tipping toward the babbling stream that fed into the sacred spring. Serena was faster. She shifted mid-leap, becoming human as her hand closed around Dominic's wrist. Her healer magic flared instantly, and suddenly she could see the poison for what it truly was. Complex, adaptive, but ultimately just a collection of chemical bonds that could be broken. "No," she said quietly, her golden eyes blazing. "Not today." Her power poured into the vial, unmaking the poison molecule by molecule. Dominic screamed as the liquid in his hand began to glow, then shimmer, then dissolve into harmless water. "Impossible," he breathed, staring at the empty vial in his hand. "I'm not just a healer anymore," Serena said, releasing his wrist and stepping back. "I'm pack. I'm bonded. I'm both wolf and witch, and you will never harm my family again." Around them, the battle had ended. Dominic's soldiers had been disarmed and subdued, including the young noble from the tower, who now knelt with hands bound and head bowed. The pack circled closer, growls rumbling like distant thunder. "You've lost, Dominic," Magnus said. "Surrender and you'll face trial under pack law." For a moment, Dominic looked like he might choose death rather than capitulation. Then his shoulders sagged in defeat. "I surrender," he said hollowly. The pack erupted in howls of victory. They'd defended their home, saved their sacred spring, ended the threat that had hung over them for years. But Serena felt no triumph, only exhaustion. The healer magic she'd used to destroy Dominic's poison had drained her completely. Through the bond, she felt Magnus's alarm as her legs buckled, her newly healed shoulder throbbing intensely. He caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest. "Serena, stay with me." "I'm fine," she mumbled. "Just tired, shoulder hurts." "Then rest." Magnus pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You've earned it. You saved us all." As pack wolves began securing prisoners and tending to the wounded, Magnus carried Serena back toward the village. Through the bond, she felt his love wrapping around her like a warm blanket, soothing her exhaustion. "Magnus," she whispered, fighting to stay conscious. "What happens now?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Now we rebuild. Dominic's capture will send a message to Vidian Court. With him and his co-conspirators arrested, we can negotiate a real peace treaty, one based on mutual respect rather than fear." "And us?" Serena asked, her golden eyes meeting his gray ones. Magnus stopped walking and looked down at her. "We live, Serena. We heal together. We lead together." He hesitated, then added, "You're my bonded mate, which makes you pack royalty if you want this life." "I chose you," Serena interrupted, pressing her hand to his chest where she could feel his heartbeat matching hers through the bond. "That's all the choice I needed." They reached the healing house to find Lily waiting anxiously. The girl's face lit up at the sight of her sister alive and conscious. "Serena!" She threw herself forward, then stopped short, uncertainty crossing her features as she took in her sister's transformation. "Your eyes are different, and your hair. It's silver now." "I'm different," Serena admitted, reaching out to touch her sister's cheek. "I'm Pack now, a shifter. I can never go back to being fully human." Lily considered this for perhaps 3 seconds, then shrugged with the adaptability of youth. "Can I learn to shift too?" Despite everything, Serena laughed. "That's not exactly how it works." "But she can stay." Lily looked hopefully at Magnus. "For as long as you want," Magnus said warmly. "You're Serena's family, which makes you Pack family. Always welcome." Sylvia emerged from the healing house, her face stern, but her eyes kind. "Now you've burned through more magic today than most healers use in a year, and that shoulder wound needs proper treatment." She looked at Magnus. "And you, Alpha King, need to stay close. The bond is still settling." "I'm not going anywhere," Magnus said firmly. They settled Serena in a soft bed piled with furs, Magnus lying beside her with Lily curled in a chair nearby. Through the window, they could hear the pack celebrating, howls of joy, songs of victory, the sounds of a people who had faced extinction and emerged stronger. Later, Alara brought news that Morgana had gone into hiding after helping them, protected by loyal staff who opposed Dominic's genocide. She'd sent word that she was safe and would testify when the time came for Dominic's formal trial. "Magnus," Serena whispered as she drifted toward sleep, exhaustion finally claiming her. "Yes?" His voice answered in her mind, warm and intimate. "Thank you for being worth surviving for." "Thank you for choosing to survive," he replied, his arms tightening around her. "For choosing us." Through the bond, she felt his love and gratitude, felt the pack's acceptance flowing around them like a living current, felt Lily's presence, safe and happy nearby, felt the completeness of finally belonging. This was home. This was family. And as sleep claimed her, surrounded by love and Pack and the mate her soul had chosen, Serena knew with absolute certainty that she had survived one night beside the Alpha King, and she had chosen to stay beside him for every night after. 3 days had passed since Dominic's capture. The forest of silver pines settled into an uneasy calm, like the stillness after a violent storm when one is not yet certain if the worst has truly passed. Magnus stood atop the ancient ceremonial stone that had served as meeting place for Alpha Kings for centuries, watching the sun rise over his territory. The golden light filtered through silver pine needles, casting dappled shadows that shifted with the morning breeze. His body had healed from the silver poisoning, though faint traces of darkened veins remained visible beneath the skin of his forearms, battle scars that would never fully fade. Physical recovery had come swiftly once the bond with Serena was completed, but the political aftermath of Dominic's failed genocide attempt proved far more complex. "The Vidian delegation will arrive by midday," Kane reported, climbing the stone to stand beside his king. The commander's face showed fresh scars from the rescue mission, badges of honor among their kind. 6 representatives, including 2 military officers and their high counselor, Ardeth. Magnus nodded thoughtfully. Ardeth is a pragmatist. His presence suggests they're serious about negotiation rather than retribution. Or they're simply gathering intelligence for a larger assault, Kane countered, ever the skeptical strategist. Perhaps. Magnus didn't dismiss the possibility. 60 years of fragile peace had taught him to expect the worst while working toward better. Have the prisoners been prepared for exchange? Yes, though I still believe executing Dominic would send a clearer message. Magnus turned to study his second-in-command, the friend who had stood beside him through decades of challenges. And what message would that be, old friend? That we are the monsters they claim? That blood must always be answered with blood? Kane's jaw tightened, but he offered no rebuttal. They had had this discussion many times in recent days, with the pack divided between those demanding retribution and those seeking lasting peace. Dominic will face justice, Magnus continued, but not by our hand. The evidence Morgana provided of his unsanctioned experiments has turned much of the Vidian court against him. His own people will judge him more harshly than we ever could. A familiar presence touched Magnus's mind through their bond, warmth and affection colored with mild exasperation. He smiled as Serena's thoughts formed words in his consciousness. "You left before I woke," she chided gently. "The bed grows cold without you." He sent back a wave of apology tinged with amusement. "Alpha duties, the delegation approaches. I know, I'm coming to you." Minutes later, Serena emerged from the forest path leading to the stone. The transformation had changed her profoundly, yet somehow strengthened, rather than erased her essential nature. Her once brown hair now shimmered silver white, and her eyes held the golden glow of healing magic merged with wolf nature. She moved with a predator's grace that had never been part of her human identity, yet the compassion that defined her remained unaltered. She wore the traditional garb of pack healers, a tunic of soft green leather with intricate silver embroidery depicting ancient healing symbols. At her throat, a pendant of polished moonstone marked her status as both Omega and bonded mate to the Alpha King. These outward changes marked only the surface transformation. The deeper changes were known only to those who shared her daily life. The pack had accepted her with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Some embraced her immediately, particularly those she had helped heal during the escape and battle. Others, especially older wolves with long memories of human treachery, maintained a wary distance. Lily had adapted with remarkable ease, forming fast friendships with the pack's adolescents and spending hours each day learning their ways and history. "Commander," Serena acknowledged Kane with a respectful nod as she joined them. "Healer," he returned with equal formality. Their relationship remained professional, but had warmed considerably after he witnessed her destroy Dominic's poison and save countless pack members. "The delegates will expect to see you," Magnus said, taking Serena's hand. "A human who chose to become wolf is unprecedented. You represent possibilities many have never considered." "Or their worst fears confirmed," she replied pragmatically. "Proof that wolves can corrupt humans." "The truth lies somewhere between," Magnus acknowledged. "But your presence makes it impossible to reduce this conflict to simple villains and victims. You force them to see complexity." Kane excused himself to oversee final security preparations, leaving the bonded pair alone on the ancient stone. For a moment they stood in silence, watching the forest awaken around them. "Are you certain you're ready for this?" Magnus finally asked, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Facing Vidian authorities so soon after your transformation?" Serena considered the question seriously. The physical change had been relatively swift, her body adapting to its new nature with unexpected resilience. The mental adjustment proved more challenging. Wolf instincts now colored her perceptions and reactions, sometimes surfacing without warning. Just yesterday, she had growled at a pack member who approached Lily too aggressively, the sound startling her as much as the recipient. "I'm ready," she decided. "These negotiations affect my future as much as anyone's." Her free hand rose to touch the scar on her neck where Magnus had marked her. "Besides, I represent something unique, a bridge between worlds." Magnus pulled her closer, pressing his forehead to hers, in the traditional wolf gesture of affection and trust. Through their bond flowed emotions too complex for words: pride, concern, love, and fierce protectiveness. "Together, then," he murmured. "Always," she answered. The council chamber occupied the largest structure in the Silver Pine settlement, an ancient building constructed around a living silver pine whose trunk formed its central column. Centuries of pack meetings had polished the wooden floor to a soft glow, and the walls displayed intricately carved records of pack history dating back 15 generations. Magnus took his place at the head of the semicircular table, with Serena to his right and Alara to his left. Cain stood behind them, while pack elders and representatives from each family group filled the remaining seats. Sylvia, as High Priestess, occupied a special place near the living tree, her role transcending ordinary pack politics. When the Vidian delegation was escorted in, the atmosphere tensed perceptibly. 6 humans entered with measured steps, their formal attire marking them as high-ranking officials. At their head walked a tall, austere man with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard, High Counselor Ardeth, the second most powerful figure in Vidian government. His gaze swept the chamber, pausing briefly on each face before settling on Magnus. Then his attention shifted to Serena, and surprise flickered across his controlled features. "Alpha King Magnus," he began with formal correctness. "I bring greetings from the Vidian Council of 12. We come seeking resolution to recent events." "High Counselor," Magnus acknowledged. "Silverpine welcomes those who come in peace." Ardeth nodded, then gestured to Serena. "I was told a human healer had aided your escape. I see the situation is more complex than reported. This is Serena, former healer of Ashevale, now my bonded mate and pack healer." Magnus introduced her with deliberate emphasis on both her former human status and current pack position. "A human who became wolf," Ardeth noted, studying her with undisguised curiosity. "Voluntary transformation is unprecedented in our records." "Many things have occurred recently that have no precedent," Serena replied evenly, including a Vidian governor's attempt at genocide. A ripple of tension passed through both delegations. One of the Vidian military officers shifted uncomfortably, hand moving subtly toward where a weapon would normally be carried. "Governor Dominic acted without authorization," Ardeth stated firmly. "His experiments violated multiple provisions of Vidian law, as well as the Treaty of the Silver Moon. We come in part to formally dissociate our government from his actions." "Convenient," Cain muttered, just loudly enough to be heard. Ardeth turned to face the commander directly. "There is nothing convenient about this situation, Commander. Governor Dominic's actions have damaged decades of diplomatic relations and endangered innocent lives on both sides. The Council wishes to make amends and establish stronger safeguards against future abuses." "Words are easy," Alara observed coolly. "I've heard many fine promises during my years as diplomatic guest in Vidian court. Most proved hollow. Which brings us to another purpose of our visit," Ardeth acknowledged with a slight bow toward her. "The Council formally releases Princess Alara from all obligations under the hostage provisions of the previous treaty. Her captivity, however comfortable, is now acknowledged as unjust." This announcement caused murmurs among the pack representatives. The diplomatic guest arrangement had been a barely disguised hostage situation, with Alara's safety ensuring pack compliance with treaty terms. Its termination represented a significant shift in Vidian policy. "And what would you propose in its place?" Magnus asked, leaning forward slightly. "A true alliance," Ardeth replied. "Equal representation, mutual defense agreements, open trade, and cultural exchange." The chamber erupted in exclamations of disbelief and cautious hope. Magnus raised a hand, and silence fell immediately. "Fine words," he acknowledged. "But recent events have damaged trust profoundly. What guarantees can you offer that these terms will be honored by future councils or governors?" "A fair question," Ardeth conceded. "We propose 3 concrete measures. First, establishment of a joint oversight committee with equal representation from both sides. Second, regular rotation of diplomatic representatives residing in each other's territories, not hostages, but true ambassadors. Third, and perhaps most significantly—" He paused, seeming to choose his next words with great care. "The Council proposes shared stewardship of the border territories, including joint management of the silver pine forests that have been the source of so much conflict." Magnus kept his expression neutral, though through the bond, Serena felt his surprise and cautious interest. The silver pines had always been the focal point of tension, sacred to the wolf packs, coveted by humans for their magical properties. No previous Vidian government had ever suggested sharing control. "And Dominic?" Cain demanded. "What justice will he face?" "Public trial for crimes against both our peoples," Ardeth replied without hesitation. "If found guilty, and the evidence is overwhelming, execution or lifetime imprisonment at the Council's discretion." "With wolf witnesses permitted to testify?" Alara pressed. "Full participation in the proceedings," Ardeth confirmed. "We seek justice, not a political performance." Magnus exchanged glances with his advisors, then addressed Ardeth directly. These proposals merit serious consideration. We request time to discuss them privately." "Of course," Ardeth bowed slightly. "We will await your response." After the Vidian delegation withdrew, the Pack Council erupted in heated debate. Opinions divided sharply between those who saw opportunity in the proposed alliance and those who considered any trust in human promises foolhardy. "They fear us now," argued Torsten, an elder whose family had lost members to human hunters. "Dominic's failure shows them our strength. We should press our advantage, demand more territory." "And then what?" countered Alara. "Perpetual vigilance? Constant preparation for the next conflict? I've lived among them for 5 years. They outnumber us 50-1. Even if we won initially, they would eventually overwhelm us through sheer numbers." "The princess speaks truth," Sylvia added, her ancient voice commanding immediate attention. "I have witnessed 3 great wars between our peoples. Each ended with fewer of us remaining, our bloodlines thinning, our future dimming. We cannot afford another." "What of their true motives?" asked Morena, a respected warrior. "This change of heart comes too suddenly to trust." "Not as sudden as it appears," Magnus interjected. "Morgana has provided evidence that a faction within the Vidian Council has opposed Dominic's policies for years. His capture simply gave them the leverage to act openly." Throughout the debate, Serena remained silent, absorbing the complex interplay of pack politics. As the only former human present, her perspective was unique, yet she hesitated to impose her views until she understood all facets of the situation. Magnus sensed her thoughts through their bond. "Serena," he said, turning to her, "you've been quiet. The council would benefit from your insight." All eyes turned to her expectantly. Serena gathered her thoughts before speaking. "I've lived on both sides of this conflict," she began carefully. "In Ashevale, most ordinary citizens know little about wolfkind beyond stories meant to frighten children. They fear what they don't understand. But fear can transform into respect and even alliance when knowledge replaces ignorance." She looked around this table, meeting each gaze directly. "What Ardeth proposes isn't just political expedience. It's the beginning of a path that could eventually lead to true understanding. As a healer, I know that wounds must be cleaned before they can heal. This proposal offers that chance." "And if it's a trap?" Kane challenged, though his tone held respect rather than antagonism. "Then we will have lost nothing but time," Serena answered. "The alliance can be structured with safeguards, phases that build gradually as trust is earned on both sides." Magnus nodded thoughtfully. "A measured approach. We begin with small steps that demonstrate good faith, then progress to larger commitments only as each party proves trustworthy." Discussion continued for hours, gradually shifting from whether to accept the alliance to how best to structure it. By the time the Vidian delegation was invited to return, the pack had reached consensus on a response. Magnus stood to address Ardeth formally. "Silverpine accepts the principle of alliance with conditions. We propose a phased implementation, beginning with immediate prisoner exchange and establishment of the Joint Oversight Committee. Further integration would progress as milestones of trust are achieved." Ardeth considered this, then nodded. "The Council anticipated such caution and authorizes me to accept these terms. We can begin drafting the specific phases immediately." "There is one additional condition," Magnus continued. "The border village of Ashevale will become a neutral zone, governed jointly as a model for our cooperation, and a place where both our peoples can interact freely." This request clearly surprised the Vidian representatives, who conferred briefly among themselves before Ardeth responded. "Ashevale holds strategic importance for border security. May I ask the reasoning behind this specific request?" "It was my home," Serena answered before Magnus could speak. "A place where humans already live in proximity to Silverpine territory. Its people have suffered from being caught between 2 worlds. They deserve better." Understanding dawned in Ardeth's eyes. A personal connection. Yet the proposal has merit beyond sentiment. A neutral zone would provide opportunity for controlled cultural exchange, a testing ground for wider integration. He straightened. "I am authorized to accept reasonable amendments. This one I believe the Council will approve." The meeting concluded with arrangements for formal treaty drafting to begin the following day. As the participants filed out, Ardeth approached Serena directly. "Healer," he said quietly, "might I have a word in private?" Magnus tensed subtly, but Serena placed a calming hand on his arm. "It's all right," she assured him through their bond. "I sense no deception in him." When they were relatively isolated in a corner of the chamber, Ardeth spoke in a low voice. I had a sister once. She possessed an unusual gift for healing, though nothing as profound as what I witnessed during your confrontation with Dominic. Serena remained silent, sensing more to come. She was taken during the purges 30 years ago, he continued, pain evident beneath his controlled expression, accused of unnatural arts by those who feared what they could not understand. He met her eyes directly. I have spent decades working to change Vidian from within, to create a society where such persecution cannot happen again. Your existence, a bridge between human and wolf, represents an opportunity I never dared hope for. I'm sorry about your sister, Serena said genuinely, but I'm not a symbol or a tool for either side's agenda. I'm simply someone who made a choice to save what I loved. And in doing so, you may have saved far more than you intended, Ardeth replied. Legends speak of Omegas who walked between worlds in ancient times, bringing balance where chaos reigned. I never believed such tales until now. The words echoed Serena's grandmother's teaching so precisely that she felt a chill. You know of Omegas? My family preserved certain knowledge through generations, Ardeth explained, including recognition of those rare souls who carry the Omega gift. Dominic sought to eradicate all wolfkind. Others of us have worked to preserve the ancient balance. He straightened. I will be your ally in the council, but I wanted you to understand why. After the Vidian delegation departed for their temporary quarters in the neutral zone between territories, Magnus found Serena standing alone by the sacred spring. The water bubbled up from deep underground, its surface occasionally shimmering with the same starlight quality as the transformation pool. Ardeth's revelation troubles you, he observed, coming to stand beside her. Not troubles, Serena corrected. Complicates. My grandmother spoke of a time when humans and wolves lived in harmony, when Omegas served as mediators between worlds. I always thought they were bedtime stories. Now I wonder if she knew more than she revealed. The oldest pack histories mention human Omegas, Magnus confirmed. Rare individuals with healing gifts who could bond with alphas, strengthening both communities. But those records are fragmentary, from before the First Great War 5 centuries ago. Serena knelt, allowing her fingers to brush the spring's surface. Ripples spread outward, catching moonlight in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. This alliance may work, she said thoughtfully. Not because of politics or treaties, but because there are good people on both sides who remember a better way. Magnus joined her by the water's edge. It won't be easy. Centuries of fear and hatred don't disappear with a single agreement. No. She turned to face him, determination in her golden eyes. But we have something previous generations lacked, living proof that both worlds can coexist in a single heart. She placed her hand over his chest, feeling his steady heartbeat. And we have a bond that neither world can break. Later that evening, as the pack gathered for the traditional full moon celebration, an unexpected visitor arrived. Lily approached Magnus and Serena where they sat at the head table, leading a hooded figure whose scent immediately identified her to wolf senses. Morgana requested sanctuary, Lily explained, her young face serious with the responsibility of escorting such an important guest. She came to the border alone. The physician removed her hood, revealing features drawn with exhaustion, but eyes clear and resolute. Forgive the intrusion, Alpha King, but events in Vidian have accelerated. Dominic's supporters are being purged from positions of power, and those of us who opposed him must choose sides quickly. You've chosen ours? Magnus asked, gesturing for her to sit. I've chosen the side of truth, Morgana corrected. I bring copies of Dominic's research, all his notes on the silver poison, his experiments on captured wolves, and his plans for deployment against Silverpine. The originals have been provided to the Council, but I feared some details might be redacted before they reach public record. Serena accepted the leather portfolio Morgana offered. You're risking everything by bringing this to us. I took an oath to heal, the physician replied, echoing her words from their first meeting. That oath transcends political boundaries. Besides, she added with the ghost of a smile, I've always found wolfkind more honorable than most humans I've encountered. You're welcome among us, Magnus assured her. Your courage has already saved many lives. We won't forget such a debt. As the celebration continued around them, Magnus and Serena excused themselves, taking Morgana's documents to the privacy of the council chamber for examination. What they found confirmed their worst fears while offering unexpected hope. Dominic's research was more advanced than they had realized. He had systematically tested various formulations of the poison on captive wolves, documenting their suffering with clinical detachment. But he had also encountered an unexpected obstacle. Certain bloodlines showed natural resistance, particularly those with ancestral connections to the oldest pack families. "He was breeding us," Magnus observed grimly, examining charts that tracked lineages and resistance factors. Selecting the most vulnerable for elimination while preserving those whose blood might eventually strengthen his weapon. "There's more," Serena said, turning pages to reveal a separate section of notes. "Look at these observations on healing magic." He theorized that Omega healing abilities evolved specifically to counter silver toxicity. She looked up, eyes wide with realization. That's why Omegas were so valued in ancient times. They were the pack's protection against their greatest vulnerability. "And why they became targets during the purges," Magnus added. "Eliminate the healers, and the wolves become far more vulnerable." They continued studying the documents late into the night. Among the clinical horrors, they discovered unexpected information about the silver pines themselves, their unique properties, their symbiotic relationship with wolf packs, and their potential to serve as a bridge between human medicine and wolf healing traditions. "Dominic saw only weapons," Serena said finally, closing the portfolio. "But these same discoveries could heal so much suffering if used properly." Magnus nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps that's the true opportunity in this alliance. Not just peaceful coexistence, but the sharing of knowledge that benefits both our peoples." Through their bond, they shared a moment of perfect understanding, the recognition that their personal journey from enemies to mates might serve as a template for their community's larger transformation. The following morning, as treaty discussions began in earnest, Magnus and Serena presented their findings to both delegations. The revelation of Dominic's full plans shocked even the Vidian representatives, while the potential medical applications of regulated silver pine extracts offered concrete benefits to motivate cooperation. "We propose a joint research initiative," Serena suggested, standing before the assembled delegates. "Combining wolf healing traditions with human medical science, with all discoveries benefiting both communities. With strict ethical oversight," Magnus added firmly. "No experimentation without informed consent. No applications that harm either population." Ardith considered the proposal with evident interest. Such collaboration would require unprecedented trust on both sides, healers and physicians sharing centuries of closely guarded knowledge. "The alternative is continuing isolation, with each side missing half the picture," Serena countered. "How many have suffered needlessly because we refuse to learn from each other?" The discussions that followed were intense, passionate, and occasionally heated. Both sides harbored legitimate concerns about protecting sensitive information while sharing enough to make progress. By day's end, however, they had established preliminary guidelines for the research initiative, with Morgana and Serena nominated as joint directors. As the formal meetings concluded, Magnus found Serena standing alone on the ceremonial stone, watching the sunset paint the silver pines with golden light. He approached quietly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You were magnificent today," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Even Cain was impressed, and he impresses rarely. Serena leaned back against his chest, contentment flowing through their bond. "It's strange. A week ago, I was human, living a half-hidden life in Ashevale. Now I'm negotiating the future of two species." She turned in his arms to face him. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm still the same person." Magnus studied her face, noting how her transformed features still carried the essence of the woman who had offered herself as sacrifice to save him. "You're more fully yourself now," he said softly. "The change doesn't create something new. It reveals what always existed beneath the surface." "And what does it reveal in me?" she asked, only half joking. "Courage, compassion, wisdom." His hand came up to cup her cheek. The heart of a healer and the spirit of a wolf. Both were always there, waiting to be unified. Through their bond, Serena felt the depth of his certainty, the absolute faith he placed in her. It steadied her, even as her new life continued to bring daily challenges and adjustments. "The path ahead won't be easy," Magnus continued. "Treaty or not, there will be resistance on both sides. Change comes slowly to old societies." Then we'll be patient, Serena replied, and persistent, and when necessary, fierce. Magnus smiled, recognizing the wolf spirit that had always lived within her, now fully awakened. Together, he agreed. Always, she answered, sealing the promise with a kiss as the first stars appeared above Silver Pine. A month had passed since the treaty negotiations began. Early autumn painted Silver Pine in russet and gold, the silver pines standing in evergreen contrast to the seasonal transformation around them. In the joint research facility established at the edge of Ashevale, Serena sorted through ancient healing texts brought from the Pack archives, carefully comparing wolf traditions with human medical knowledge. The work progressed steadily, if sometimes contentiously. Centuries of mutual suspicion dissolved slowly, with occasional flare-ups when particularly guarded secrets from either side came under discussion. Yet the shared goal, developing treatments that combined the best of both traditions, provided enough common ground to maintain progress even through difficult moments. This combination shows promise, Morgana observed, examining a mixture of distilled silver pine essence and traditional human herbs. The healing properties are enhanced beyond what either tradition achieves alone. Serena nodded, making careful notes. The balance is critical. Too much silver essence triggers an adverse reaction in human subjects, while insufficient amounts fail to catalyze the transformation needed for deep healing. They had established rigorous testing protocols, beginning with cell cultures, then progressing to volunteer subjects with minor ailments. Early results exceeded expectations, with wounds healing twice as quickly under the combined therapy compared to traditional methods from either society. "Have you reviewed the Council's response to our latest findings?" Morgana asked, carefully storing the experimental compounds in locked cabinets. "Magnus is presenting the report today," Serena replied. Ardeth believed the demonstrated results would strengthen the moderate faction's position. Politics had proven as complex as medicine in the weeks following Dominic's capture. While the Vidian Council officially condemned his actions, a significant minority still harbored deep-seated prejudices against wolfkind. Similarly, elements within the pack resisted any true integration with humans, preferring isolation to the uncertainties of alliance. Only the obvious benefits of cooperation, particularly in medicine, kept the treaty process moving forward. Even the most skeptical traditionalists on both sides found it difficult to argue against treatments that saved lives and eased suffering. Serena gathered her materials, preparing to return to the Pack Village for the evening council meeting. The daily commute between human and wolf territories had become routine, though she never crossed the border without awareness of her unique position. To the wolves, she represented the human perspective despite her transformation. To the humans, she embodied the possibility of connection with their mysterious neighbors. Lily had adapted to their new circumstances with remarkable resilience, dividing her time between lessons with human teachers in Ashevale and cultural education with wolf elders. At 15, she absorbed both traditions eagerly, often identifying connections that adults overlooked. "You seem distracted," Morgana noted as they secured the laboratory. "Is something troubling you?" Serena hesitated before answering. "Something feels wrong. I can't identify what exactly, but there's a sense of foreboding I can't shake." She pressed her hand to the mark on her neck, now a silvery scar that pulsed faintly with the bond's energy. "Magnus feels it too. The bond has been unsettled since dawn." Morgana's expression turned grave. "I've learned to respect intuition, especially when it comes through pack bonds. Perhaps extra vigilance would be prudent." They parted at the village edge, Morgana returning to her quarters in Ashevale, while Serena continued toward the forest path that led to Silverpine territory. As she walked, her newly enhanced senses remained alert, cataloging subtle changes in the environment. Birds fell silent as she passed, unusual for the typically untroubled wildlife. The wind carried scents that seemed somehow wrong, metallic and sharp beneath the natural forest perfume. Halfway to the border, Serena stopped abruptly. Something moved in the underbrush ahead, too large for forest creatures, too deliberate for innocent travelers. She slipped behind a broad oak, senses straining. 3 men emerged onto the path, dressed in nondescript clothing, but moving with military precision. Nothing in their appearance marked them as threatening, yet Serena's instincts screamed warning. Through the bond, she sent a pulse of alert to Magnus, receiving immediate acknowledgement and concern in return. The men paused, clearly searching for something. One pulled a device from his pocket, a compact metal cylinder that emitted a faint blue glow. Serena recognized it immediately from Dominic's research notes, a detection unit calibrated to trace silver pine essence. They were scanning the path to the sacred spring. With silent grace born of her wolf nature, Serena retreated deeper into the forest, circling to approach silver pine territory from an unexpected direction. She needed to warn the pack without alerting these intruders to her presence. She had nearly reached the border stones when a sharp crack pierced the forest silence, a branch breaking under careless weight. Serena froze, but too late. A fourth man, previously unseen, stood 20 paces away, a crossbow aimed directly at her heart. "Don't move, wolfwoman," he commanded quietly. "This bolt contains enough concentrated silver to kill even an alpha. For a half-breed like you, it would be especially unpleasant." Serena assessed her options with preternatural calm. The distance was too great to attack before he could fire. Running would only present an easier target. Transformation would take precious seconds she didn't have. "What do you want?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "You'll be coming with us," the man replied. "Governor Dominic sends his regards." Cold realization washed through her. Dominic is imprisoned. The council stripped him of authority. The man's thin smile held no warmth. "The council is comprised of politicians who lack vision. True patriots understand Dominic's importance to Vidian's future." He gestured with the crossbow. "Now, you'll walk ahead of me, back to my colleagues. One wrong move, and this bolt finds its mark." Serena complied, mind racing. Through the bond, she communicated the situation to Magnus, feeling his immediate surge of protective rage followed by strategic calculation. Help would come, but she needed to survive until then. The other three men appeared unsurprised by her capture, suggesting a well-coordinated plan. One produced silver manacles similar to those that had bound Magnus in Vidian's dungeons. "These should suppress any tendencies toward transformation," he explained with clinical detachment. "We require you intact for study, but not necessarily comfortable." As they secured the restraints, Serena bit back a cry of pain as silver touched her skin. The burning sensation was intense, though not as debilitating as it would be for a born wolf. Her partially human nature provided some resistance, a fact she carefully kept hidden from her captors. "Dominic's research notes mentioned you specifically," the leader continued, as they began marching her toward the village edge. "A human Omega with healing abilities who survived transformation. You represent a unique research opportunity." "I represent nothing," Serena countered. "I'm an individual who made a choice, not an experiment for your master's obsession." "Individual choice is secondary to species survival," the man replied with the certainty of a true believer. "Humans and wolves cannot coexist indefinitely. One must eventually dominate. Dominic ensures it will be humanity." They reached a covered wagon concealed in a hollow near the village boundary. Inside, specialized equipment suggested a mobile laboratory, refinements of Dominic's original research tools, designed for field operation. "The extraction process will begin immediately," the leader instructed his team. "We require blood, tissue, and bone marrow samples before transport." Serena fought to maintain composure as they secured her to an examination table. The silver manacles burned against her wrists, but through concentration, she found she could still access a thread of her healing power. Not enough to break free, but perhaps sufficient for another purpose. As one man prepared collection equipment, Serena focused her remaining energy on the bond. Instead of sending thoughts or emotions to Magnus, she directed her awareness outward, expanding her perception through the connection they shared. His senses became extensions of her own, allowing her to share precise details of her location and captors. "Interesting reaction," noted the man monitoring her vital signs. "Elevated neurological activity despite the silver suppression. Make a note for Dominic's review." "You truly believe he'll be released," Serena observed, buying time, "despite his crimes being publicly documented." "Released? No," the leader replied, checking calibrations on his equipment. "But prison walls mean little when one has dedicated followers in positions throughout government. Dominic continues his work through us, preparing for the day when Vidian realizes the true threat wolfkind represents." "You're wrong about the threat," Serena said quietly. "The real danger comes from those who fear difference so deeply they would commit genocide rather than adapt." The leader paused, studying her with genuine curiosity. "You were human once. How can you defend creatures who exist as living violations of natural order?" "Natural order?" Serena laughed softly despite her circumstances. Nature thrives on diversity, on adaptation, on finding new paths forward. What you call violation is simply evolution taking an unexpected turn. Philosophy won't save you, he responded, returning to his preparations. Nor will it prevent us from completing Dominic's work. The silver poison formula is nearly perfected. With samples from your transformed physiology, we can address the final variables. Through the bond, Serena felt Magnus drawing nearer, accompanied by others moving in coordinated formation. She needed just a few more minutes of distraction. Dominic's research was fundamentally flawed, she said, injecting authority into her voice. His initial premise, that silver pine essence could be weaponized against wolfkind, ignored the symbiotic relationship between the trees and those they evolved alongside. This caught the attention of the team's scientist, who paused in his work. Explain. Silver pines don't merely exist in wolf territories by coincidence, Serena continued. They require specific soil conditions created by pack presence over generations. In return, they provide resistance to illness and enhanced healing for those who live among them. Dominic's attempt to turn their essence into poison was working against the tree's fundamental nature. Yet he succeeded, the scientist countered. The compound was demonstrably effective. Temporarily, Serena corrected. But have you reviewed his long-term test results? The poison degraded rapidly after initial synthesis, becoming inert within days. He achieved weaponization only through continuous fresh production, an unsustainable model for large-scale deployment. The scientist frowned, clearly disturbed by this information. That data wasn't in the files we recovered. Because Dominic destroyed evidence of failures, Serena pressed her advantage. His obsession wouldn't allow him to acknowledge fundamental flaws in his approach. Their discussion was abruptly interrupted by a sound that chilled even Serena's blood. The hunting howl of an alpha wolf echoing through the forest with primal authority. It was answered immediately by a chorus of pack voices, surrounding the encampment in a circle of approaching predators. The men reacted instantly, grabbing weapons and moving to defensive positions. Their leader barked orders with military precision, but Serena noted the fear beneath his controlled exterior. These were Dominic's ideological disciples, not experienced wolf hunters. They'll tear you apart before you can reload those crossbows, Serena said calmly. Silver bolts or not. Then you'll die first, the leader snarled, turning his weapon toward her. Before he could fire, the wagon's canvas top was ripped away, revealing the twilight sky and the massive silver-gray wolf that landed in their midst. Magnus's transformation to human form was instantaneous, his movement from entry to action seamless as he disarmed the leader with brutal efficiency. The battle lasted less than a minute. Kane and 3 senior warriors neutralized the remaining captors, while Alara freed Serena from her restraints, careful to use cloth barriers when handling the silver manacles. "Are you injured?" Magnus asked, his voice tight with controlled fury as he examined the burns on her wrists. "Nothing permanent," Serena assured him, allowing her healing energy to flow toward the wounds now that the silver was removed. "But we have a larger problem. These men aren't random extremists. They're part of an organized faction still loyal to Dominic. They've continued his research, and from what I overheard, they're close to perfecting the poison formula." Magnus nodded grimly. "We suspected as much. Ardeth warned us of unusual movements among Dominic's former military associates. This confirms his intelligence. They specifically targeted me for my unique physiology," Serena continued, examining the laboratory equipment with professional interest. The combination of human omega traits with wolf transformation apparently represents the final variable they needed to solve stability issues in the poison formula. Kane approached, having secured the prisoners. "We should move quickly. If these were scouts for a larger operation—" He was interrupted by distant shouts from the direction of Ashevale. Through the trees, they saw the flicker of torches moving toward the border, dozens of them, advancing in formation. "Too late," Magnus said quietly. "The main force approaches." They moved swiftly through the forest, Serena and Magnus in human form, while Kane and the warriors shifted to wolves for greater speed. They reached the border stones as the torchbearers came into clear view. At least 60 armed men led by a figure Serena recognized with shock. "Counselor Ardeth," she breathed in disbelief. "He betrayed us?" "Not Ardeth," Magnus corrected, his enhanced vision penetrating the gathering darkness. "Look closer." The leader indeed resembled Ardeth superficially, similar height and build, with the same silver hair. But as he drew nearer, Serena noted crucial differences: harder features, colder eyes, and a military bearing Ardeth had never displayed. "His brother," Magnus explained, "General Thaddeus. They're twins, though ideological opposites. Ardeth has warned us about him for years, a hardliner who considers Dominic's anti-wolf policies too moderate." Kane growled low in his throat. "The pack is mobilizing, but they'll need time to reach us. We're outnumbered 10-1. "Then we buy time," Magnus decided. Serena returned to the village, warned Sylvia and the elders, "Get the young and vulnerable to the sanctuary caves." "I'm staying with you," she countered immediately. "This isn't a debate," Magnus began, but Serena cut him off. "You're right, it isn't," she agreed. "Our bond is strongest when we're together. Whatever we face as mates." Through their connection, she added silently, "Besides, I may have a plan." Magnus studied her for a moment, then nodded. "What do you need?" "Access to the sacred spring," she replied, "and time. Can you provide both?" "We can," Kane answered for his king, already signaling the warriors into defensive formation. As the Vidian forces approached the border stones, Magnus stepped forward alone, unarmed but radiating the quiet authority that had led his pack for decades. "General Thaddeus," he called, "you enter Silverpine territory unannounced and heavily armed. Explain your purpose before this becomes an act of war." Thaddeus halted his forces at the boundary line, a thin smile crossing his severe features. "No war, Alpha King. Merely enforcement of Vidian law. We have evidence of illegal activities based in your territory, specifically the development of biological weapons targeted at humans." "A transparent fabrication," Magnus responded calmly, "though remarkably similar to your brother Dominic's actual crimes against my people." "My brother Ardeth is a traitor to his species," Thaddeus spat, "collaborating with animals while neglecting human supremacy." He gestured to his forces. "I represent those who remember humanity's proper place as masters of this world, not equal partners with beasts." While they spoke, Serena slipped away, following a nearly invisible path known only to pack members. The route to the sacred spring was ancient, protected by generations of guardians who understood its vital importance to wolfkind's survival. The spring itself lay in a small clearing surrounded by the oldest silver pines in the forest. Their massive trunks formed a natural cathedral around the pool, which glimmered with the same starlight quality as the transformation waters. This was the source from which all pack magic flowed, the wellspring that nourished their connection to the land. Serena approached reverently, aware that what she planned had never been attempted in recorded history. As both healer and wolf, human and omega, she stood at the intersection of traditions thought incompatible for centuries. Yet that unique perspective might now provide the solution they desperately needed. Kneeling at the spring's edge, she placed her hands upon the water's surface. Golden healing energy flowed from her palms, not to heal physical wounds, but to communicate with something far more ancient than any individual life. "I seek understanding," she whispered to the waters. "Not control, not power, but partnership as it existed in the beginning." The spring's surface remained still for several heartbeats. Then, slowly, it began to pulse with soft blue light that synchronized with her golden energy, creating a harmonious rhythm like two hearts beating as one. Through their bond, Serena felt Magnus engaging Thaddeus in formal negotiation, a deliberate delay tactic that violated every instinct of the Alpha protecting his territory. She sent gratitude and encouragement through their connection, then returned her full attention to the communion taking shape beneath her hands. Images formed in her mind, not memories, but knowledge far older than human or wolf civilization. She saw the first silver pines emerging from primeval soil, growing in symbiotic relationship with the earliest wolf packs. She witnessed the first human healers learning from wolf behavior, developing medicines based on careful observation of which plants wolves sought when injured or ill. Most importantly, she understood the true nature of the silver pines themselves. Not merely trees, but semi-sentient guardians whose essence adapted continuously to protect those who lived among them. Dominic's weapon had temporarily succeeded only because he had forcibly extracted that essence from its natural context. Given time, the silver pines would have evolved resistance, rendering the poison ineffective. With this understanding came revelation. The trees weren't passive participants in forest ecology, but active protectors with capacity far beyond anything Dominic had imagined. Their essence could indeed be weaponized, not against wolves, but against those who threatened the ancient balance between species. Focusing her healing energy through the bond, Serena transmitted her discovery to Magnus. His shock and wonder flowed back to her, followed by grim determination. What she proposed was unprecedented, potentially dangerous, but might provide their only path to survival without bloodshed. At the border confrontation, Magnus suddenly shifted his approach. "Before this escalates further, General, I propose a demonstration. You claim concern about biological weapons. Allow me to show you the true relationship between Silverpine and its guardians." Thaddeus narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "What trick is this?" "No trick," Magnus assured him. "Simply truth your brother Dominic never understood despite years of research. The Silverpines are more than trees, General. They are witnesses to history, keepers of balance." "Superstitious nonsense," Thaddeus scoffed, but curiosity warred with contempt in his expression. "Then you have nothing to fear from a simple demonstration," Magnus countered. "Order your men to hold position, and I will show you what Dominic sought but never found, the true power of Silverpine." Whether motivated by genuine curiosity or confidence in his superior numbers, Thaddeus agreed with a curt nod. "Proceed, but be warned. My men are authorized to open fire at the first sign of aggression." Magnus turned towards the sacred spring, extending both arms in a formal gesture passed down through 15 generations of Alpha Kings. "Ancient guardians, witnesses to the covenant, we call upon your wisdom in this hour of need." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a subtle vibration passed through the forest floor, rippling outward from the direction of the spring. The silver pines began to sway, though no wind disturbed the autumn evening. A soft blue glow emanated from the trees, spreading from one to another, until the entire border forest was illuminated in ethereal light, the air filled with a fine, shimmering mist that carried the distinctive scent of silver pine essence, but intensified, purified to its most potent form. General Thaddeus and his forces watched in stunned silence as the mist enveloped them. Those carrying Dominic's poison felt the vials grow hot in their hands, the corrupted essence within neutralized by contact with its pure original form. Weapons forged with silver alloys tarnished instantly, their edges dulling as if aged decades in moments. Most remarkably, the mist seemed to affect the men themselves differently according to their intentions. Those who came with genuine hatred and plans for violence found themselves overwhelmed with uncharacteristic exhaustion, their aggression draining away like water through sand. Others, who had followed orders with doubts or misconceptions, experienced clarity, seeing wolfkind not as monsters, but as complex beings with their own valid claim to existence. At the spring, Serena maintained her connection to the ancient consciousness, guiding but not controlling the response. This was not an attack but a revelation, not a weapon but a truth too long hidden from both species. General Thaddeus alone seemed to resist the mist's influence, his hatred too deeply rooted to be easily dissolved. He staggered forward, drawing a ceremonial silver dagger from his belt. "Tricks and illusions," he snarled, advancing toward Magnus. "I will not be swayed by wolf magic." Before he could reach his target, Serena emerged from the forest path, her eyes glowing gold with healer energy, her silver-white hair luminous in the blue light of the awakened pines. "This is not magic, General," she said calmly. "It is simply nature asserting its proper balance. The silver pines have protected this land since before either humans or wolves claimed territories. They recognize threats to the ancient harmony and respond accordingly." "You were human once," Thaddeus accused, recognizing her from intelligence reports. "How can you betray your own kind for these beasts?" "I betrayed nothing except ignorance," Serena replied. "I chose knowledge over fear, understanding over hatred. The same choice now stands before you." She gestured toward his men, many of whom had lowered their weapons, staring around in confusion or wonder as the mist continued its work of revelation. "Your force is neutralized, not through violence, but through truth. They see now what Dominic refused to acknowledge, that coexistence isn't merely possible, but necessary for both our kinds to thrive." Thaddeus looked from his disorganized troops to the wolves gathering silently at the forest's edge, then to the still glowing silver pines that surrounded them. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his hardened features. "This changes nothing," he insisted, though with less conviction. "The Council will send more forces. The threat Wolfkind represents cannot be dismissed with pretty lights and mind-altering vapors." "The Council already knows the truth," came a familiar voice from behind the Vidian lines. Ardeth stepped forward, accompanied by Morgana and a contingent of official Vidian peacekeepers. "Your unauthorized military action has been documented, brother. Your co-conspirators in government have been identified and detained." Thaddeus's face contorted with fury. "You would side with animals against your own blood?" "I side with truth against fanaticism," Ardeth replied simply. "With life against destruction. The path Dominic charted, the path you followed, leads only to mutual annihilation." He turned to address both Magnus and the assembled pack. "On behalf of the Vidian Council, I formally apologize for this violation of sovereign territory and the treaty still under negotiation. Those responsible will face justice under our laws." As Vidian peacekeepers moved to take Thaddeus and his officers into custody, Magnus approached Ardeth with measured steps. "This incident demonstrates the fragility of our progress. Elements within both our societies resist change, cling to old hatreds. True peace is never easily won," Ardeth acknowledged. "But what we witnessed here tonight," he gestured toward the silver pines whose glow had begun to fade, "suggests possibilities beyond our previous understanding." He looked toward Serena. "Your mate has unlocked knowledge that changes everything, Alpha King." "Not unlocked," Serena corrected, coming to stand beside Magnus. "Remembered. This knowledge was never truly lost, merely forgotten in our mutual fear and suspicion." As the confrontation resolved, and both sides began the process of withdrawal, Serena felt a profound weariness settle over her. The communion with the silver pines had demanded more energy than she'd anticipated, leaving her drained but fulfilled. Magnus sensed her fatigue through their bond and supported her as they walked back toward the pack village. "What you did tonight was unprecedented," he said quietly. "No recorded Alpha or Omega has ever communicated directly with the Forest Guardians." "Perhaps they never needed to," Serena suggested. "Or perhaps the Guardians were waiting for someone who could bridge both worlds, who carried both traditions within a single heart." The implications of this discovery would take years to fully understand. The silver pines weren't merely magical trees, but conscious entities with whom partnership was possible. Their essence, properly approached with respect rather than exploitation, offered healing and protection to both species. As dawn approached, the pack gathered in the central meeting ground. News of the confrontation and its remarkable resolution had spread rapidly, drawing everyone from elders to cubs eager to witness history's turning point. Magnus and Serena stood together before the assembly, their bond visible to all in the subtle synchronization of their movements and the matching silver scars at their throats. "Tonight, we faced extinction," Magnus addressed his people. "Not for the first time, nor likely the last. But tonight, we found protection not through violence or separation, but through reconnection with our most ancient allies." He gestured toward the silver pines surrounding the village. "The guardians who have watched over Wolfkind since the first pack claimed these lands have reminded us of a truth long forgotten, that our strength lies not in isolation, but in balance." Murmurs of wonder and speculation passed through the gathering. Many had witnessed the blue mist and its effects, but few understood the full significance of what had transpired. "The treaty negotiations will continue," Magnus continued, "but with new understanding on both sides. The silver pines have demonstrated that forced domination of either species leads only to mutual destruction. True security comes only through cooperation and respect for the natural balance." As the assembly dispersed, Sylvia approached, her ancient eyes bright with excitement despite her advanced age. "The old stories were true," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "about Omegas who could speak to the forest itself, who mediated not just between human and wolf, but between both and the land that sustained them." "The stories were incomplete," Serena suggested gently. "They spoke of individual Omegas as if the gift were theirs alone, but what happened tonight required both wolf and human knowledge, both alpha strength and Omega healing. The bridge must extend in all directions to be truly stable." Sylvia smiled, wisdom of 9 decades shining in her eyes. "Perhaps that's the lesson we were meant to learn all along. Not that one kind must dominate, nor even that two kinds must coexist, but that many kinds together create something greater than any could achieve alone. In the days that followed, the treaty negotiations resumed with renewed purpose. The incident at the border had demonstrated both the dangers of continued hostility and the potential benefits of true cooperation. What had begun as a pragmatic political arrangement evolved into a genuine exploration of shared future. The Joint Research Initiative expanded beyond medicine to include sustainable harvesting of silver pine essence, with protocols developed in consultation with the forest guardians themselves through Serena's unique mediation. Traditional boundaries between human and wolf territories became more permeable, with mixed settlements forming in border regions where those of both species who sought closer integration could coexist. Not all embraced these changes. Conservative elements in both societies maintained separation, preserving traditional ways of life while grudgingly accepting the reality of the other's existence. But the foundation had been laid for genuine peace, not the uneasy truce of previous generations, but mutual respect built on understanding. 1 year after the night of confrontation, Magnus and Serena stood again on the ancient ceremonial stone, watching the full moon rise over Silver Pine. Behind them, a new structure neared completion, a healing center built directly over the borderline, with foundations in both territories. Here, human physicians and wolf healers would work side by side, sharing knowledge and techniques for the benefit of all. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when you made your bargain in Vidian's judgment hall?" Magnus asked, his arm around Serena's shoulders. She considered the question thoughtfully. "Not specifically, no. I acted on instinct then, driven by a debt of mercy and something deeper I didn't yet understand." She turned to face him, golden eyes meeting gray in perfect understanding. "But I knew somehow that one night beside you would change everything." "One night became forever," Magnus observed, touching the silver mark at her throat that matched his own. "The best bargain I ever made," Serena agreed with a smile. Through their bond, she felt his answering surge of affection and contentment, emotions mirrored in her own heart. Below them, lights from both Ashevale and the Pack Village twinkled in the gathering darkness, no longer separated by fear, but connected by growing threads of commerce, friendship, and shared purpose. Between them, the silver pines stood eternal, witnesses to history's long arc as it bent, however gradually, toward harmony. The Alpha King and his Omega mate descended from the ancient stone, walking the path between worlds, a path they had created together, and one they would continue to forge with each step into their shared future.